Gremlins 2: The New Batch. If you've played this on the NES, the Game Boy version is very different. Not better or worse, but different. Now, I'm more nostalgic for the NES version, but the Game Boy version plays very well. It's a side-scrolling platformer. Now, you don't natively have a weapon, unfortunately, but oftentimes you will find a weapon pretty close near the beginning of these stages. And there are also other environmental things that you can activate to also use as weaponry in this game. You do not need to have watched the film, it wouldn't hurt, but you'll still have a great time with Gremlins 2: The New Batch for the Game Boy Classic. Now, this is your black and white Game Boy. If you happen to have a Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, this will work on those consoles too. There are boss fights in this game, something to look out for. Little bonus mini stages as well. And just a fun time if you're looking for a fun new platformer for your classic Game Boy. Maybe this is one you've skipped over. Check out Gremlins 2. Now, moving on to the Super Nintendo, might want to check out Super Bowling. Now, I understand this is like, we're like, what, a bowling game? Trust me, my friend Joe pointed this game out to me. It's actually really good. It's made from American Technos. Yeah, the people who brought you Double Dragon brought you this great, amazing, arcade-style bowling game. This was kind of during a time when you had games like Baseball Stars or whatever that golf game was, where it's like, yeah, it's a sports game, but there's like a lot of people playing it because it's kind of like cartoony and has an arcade feel to it. Easy to just pick up and play, too. You can add the slice, choose your power. You can hit the button at the right time to, arc or arch the ball a little bit, spin the ball a little bit. What a fantastic, fantastic idea for a bowling game. Bowling games do not need to be difficult. They just need to be pick up and play and have fun and play as you need. You're already ready to go. You're waiting for your kids to put their shoes on. You can pop this in and play for a round and you'll be good. A couple of different gameplay modes as well, including this golf one, which is interesting. It goes by pars. Well, here's a couple of pins, so it's a par 2. Can you knock them both down in 2 rounds? Well, Super Bowling for the Super Nintendo provides that. Might want to check it out. Expanding onto your NES selection, well, the Guardian Legend is one that everybody should have in their collection. A couple of different gameplay styles in this game, too. It starts out as an overworld shooter, like an overhead shooter. Just like a vertical scrolling shooter. And pretty cool. Graphics are great, music's great and everything. Animation is fine and stuff like that. Yeah, that's pretty neat. But then the fun of it becomes a maze game when you kind of transform into this warrioress. And then you have that overworld maze style where you're going around collecting items and, moving on from there. Any game that provides multiple gameplay styles, I tend to gravitate towards because you're never too bored to stick with one thing over and over and over again. It won't be as monotonous, and I love that. And the Guardian Legend, to a lot of NES collectors, is one of the best. It's definitely worth checking out. You got your Sega Genesis ready to roll? Well, what about Two Crude Dudes? A, it's a fun name to say, and B, it's a fun game to play. Now, Two Crude Dudes from Data East, slightly tied to Bad Dudes. Did you ever play Bad Dudes in the arcade? Well, this may be from the same universe. It is a 2-player simultaneous game. You play as these just stock muscle guys who are just beating people up, and you can pick up so many items in this game to use as weaponry, including the enemies themselves. That's pretty neat. If you're looking for a great 2-player couch co-op, not a bad thing to have in your collection. Still a fun 1-player game, better as a 2-player game. Two Crude Dudes, I had a lot of fun with this game. And it's not going to break the bank or anything like that either. So if you're looking for Sega Genesis games, looking for another beat 'em up, might want to check out Two Crude Dudes. TurboGrafx-16 is one of my favorite consoles of all time, and Pac-Land was one I had a lot of fun with. Might be a little confusing at first because there's 2 modes. There's a button mode and a lever mode. Well, in the arcade, you had buttons that you would press, much like you would hit the button to jump. Well, in this game, you hit the button to either run left or the other button to run right. And then there's a jump. You can have that same arcade experience at home with that feature, or if you do the lever mode, it's just going to be your D-pad left and right will move you left and right, and then your button will jump. That's fine too. Either way you look at it, that's usually the way I play it. I just play with the D-pad. It's still a fun experience. It's just a fun, cartoony, platformy, it's not really so much platform so much, but just that fun style and it happens to feature Pac-Man based on the cartoon. Now, there was an animated Pac-Man series in the 80s, believe it or not. Different levels have different gimmicks as well. So when you see a certain level, you're like, oh, I know what this level is going to feature. This level will feature this thing that I need to worry about, or this other thing I need to worry about. I'm a big fan of Pac-Land, TurboGrafx 16. Some of those cards are getting pretty pricey. Pac-Land is traditionally one of the cheaper games to pick up, so if you happen to see a Pac-Land laying around, even loose, might grab it for yourself. Atari 2600, well, I grew up with the Atari 2600 and I love it still. And Dragonfire, again, a couple of different gameplay styles. You have to invade the castle. So first off, you're going from castle to castle. Watch out for the breaths of fire. There's either going to be a top one or a bottom one. You can duck under the high ones, jump under the low ones. And then once you're in the castle keep, then there's the dragon protecting its treasure. You have to run out of the door, grab all the treasure as much as you can, and then once you got all the treasure, you move through the door and go on to the next area. The more you play this game, the faster the dragon moves. The more you play this game, the more fireballs the dragon's gonna blow at you. Super fun, highly addicting. How far can you go in this game? I'm a huge fan of Dragonfire, and if you're looking for a great 2600 game, this is the one to grab. How about a fun puzzle game that nobody talks about for Game Boy Color? Yogi Bear Great Balloon Blast. You're like, what? A Yogi Bear game? Excuse me, what? Trust me on this game's pretty amazing. Choose your character, you can do that up front. And how this game plays, imagine, oh, how do I describe this? Imagine a Puyo Space Invaders hybrid. Something like that. You match three, a minimum of three, that'll eliminate those colors, and then the platform or the balloons keep dropping further and further and further down. So you have to keep working at it to make sure you eliminate all the balloons before they move all the way down to where you are. It's a great puzzle game, and not a lot of people talk about this. Kind of flew under the radar when it comes to Game Boy Color. So if you're looking for some great Game Boy Color games with an unlimited gameplay style, I do love my puzzle games. Might want to check this one out. The game is called Yogi Bear Great Balloon Blast. Believe it or not, a fun puzzle game featuring Yogi Bear. Why not? Sega Master System, look no further than Quartet, one of the best. One of my favorite arcade games. Unfortunately for the Master System, you can only do a two-player game, which I know defeats the purpose of it being called Quartet. However, in the arcade, it's called Quartet. What are you gonna do about it? It has that old school Sega charm that I absolutely love. The levels in this game are not very long, and that's not a bad thing. But each level, not very long, you move your way through, lots of items you can pick up. You have kind of a health bar, other things you can do, creative enemies, great soundtrack, and you're looking for the key. Now, every stage will have a boss, and when you defeat the boss, they'll drop the key. And that key will open the door to move you to the next stage. Simple by design and concept, but man, what a fun experience this is. One of the better Master System games out there, for sure. Great arcade game. If you happen to see it in a retro arcade, definitely play some Quartet. And I love me this game. For the Sega Master System, done very well. You got a PlayStation 1 laying around. Well, one of the best ones was one of the earliest released games, and that's a game called Loaded. Now, I loved me Loaded, especially when it first came out. You choose your crazy, crazy character. This game will feature blood, and so watch out for that. Absolutely fantastic soundtrack. And not like Gauntlet, but it has that Gauntlet view, that kind of overhead style. And you have to defeat all the enemies. Well, you're picking up these key cards that will open up these certain doors to make you move on through the stages and through the next stages. A lot of enemies will start showing up trying to get at you. You just gotta get at them first with, whatever weapon you happen to be using, depending on the character you selected. I prefer this cowboy guy. This is the guy I always played as. Yeah, but however you want to play it, it's all you, buddy. The game's called Loaded. It's for the PlayStation 1. Might want to check it out. For the soundtrack alone, for the Sega CD, what about the game Hook? Now, they have Hook for the Super Nintendo, they have Hook for the Sega Genesis, and this is that same one. There is a Hook for the NES, we're not talking about that one, that's a completely different game. This one features voice. Because it's on a CD, you actually have voice samples.
Maggie, It's time for bed.
Daddy, is Grandma Wendy the real Wendy?
Maggie, that's ridiculous.
Now, not the same actors from the movie, but still something that the Genesis and Super Nintendo ones didn't provide. When you're playing the game, yeah, it's going to play the same way, but very similarly to the Genesis and Super Nintendo game. You get the soundtrack. Because it's on CD, you get the CD quality soundtrack with this game Hook. And Hook, the movie, fantastic soundtrack. I'm a big fan of the film too, but to me that just made it that much better. And to me, music and sound is such an important part of any video game of any type, of any kind, of any era. So you can have a fun game like Hook, but with that CD quality symphonic soundtrack, even better. And the game itself, if you're not familiar with Hook in the first place, even for Super Nintendo or Genesis, it's a pretty fun game. It's not bad. It's a pretty fun game. The optimal version for me is the Sega CD version. There's even little cutscenes between stages that give you a little film. Now, trust me, back in the day, this was mind-blowing. Even having something like this, it's like, oh my god, it's like you're watching a movie. Well, that's just how we felt back then. Very fun game, and a very fun game to see and play, and especially here. So if you're looking for a new game to add to your Sega CD collection, check out Hook for the Sega CD. Maybe it's on the shelf right now. Now, of course, admittedly, I had to check out this game because it's called Assault Rigs. My name's already in it. Well, it's missing a G, but still. This was an earlier release game for the PlayStation 1, and I still think it holds up today. I still think it's really fun. Now you gotta remember, when PS1 first came out, it wasn't dual analog. You still had a D-pad and your 4 buttons as well as your 4 shoulder buttons. You didn't have analog or anything like that, so it just worked and moved the best it could, and it still works and moves very, very well, I think. Simple idea, really. You play as a tank, you can pick up weapon upgrades, you have to collect the jewels along the way, defeat the enemies that happen to be in your way. These giant maze-like rooms are gonna be your each stage, and there's a ton of stages in this game. I don't know how many in total, but a lot and enough to keep you playing, no doubt indeed. The PlayStation 1 blew my mind a lot when it first came out, because I was so used to 3D being like Star Fox, or being like Mario Kart. And now that you can have like full world 3D, I mean, yeah, it looks pretty dated by today's standards, but man alive, I love this game. It's like I was actually in the tank, man. If you're looking for some PS1 games to check out, including the long box titles, you might want to check out Assault Rigs for the PS1. Moving on to the Sega Genesis, did you know that there was a Blaster Master 2? Yeah, they made a sequel to Blaster Master, one of the best NES games of all time. Now this game isn't exactly like Blaster Master 1, but it still holds its own in a lot of areas. Number 1 being the difficulty level. This game's a lot harder than it should be, in my opinion. Now the first one is pretty difficult too, but you can work your way through it. This one, oof. Maybe I just need to suck less, I don't know. And the other thing with this Blaster Master is you're going to spend most of your time in the tank, it seems. Now you can get out, and you can, climb down these ladders and stuff like that. But when you go into the rooms, instead of being the overworld exploration, it's like a 2D kind of side-scrolling-ish kind of thing. And not a whole lot of that to begin with. Yes, you do go in these rooms, yes, the graphics change and everything because now it shows you as bigger. But this is mostly where you do like some boss battles. So you just go in here and you defeat the enemies, and that's what, makes you find the weaponry or the key or whatever you need to, continue on through these stages. If you do miss that overworld element to Blaster Master, which was my favorite part of Blaster Master, really, well, you do an overworld tank area. So you're still in the tank, but then you're, it's overworld style. So you got that to look forward to as well, and that's basically the premise for all of the stages in this game, where you have your side-scrolling tank part, you get out of their tank, and you can go in the rooms to, find new items or to get the keys that you might need. And then you have this overworld tank part, and then it moves on to the next stage from there. Blaster Master 2, I mean, this was a later release Sega Genesis game. I believe it came out in 93, 94, somewhere in there. So a good, several years after Blaster Master 1 came out. And by this time, I think with Sega Genesis, more people kind of was like, hey, thank you, Genesis. I've had fun with you, and now, just kind of move on to the Super Nintendo, whatever the case is. This flies under the radar of a lot of people, not knowing that there was a Blaster Master 2. So had to show it off, and my pleasure to show it off. I think it's a fun game. If you're looking for a pretty fun Game Boy Advance game, one of my favorite games, I still play it today, is Fire Pro Wrestling. Now they have 2 of them on the Game Boy Advance. I might even recommend just the first one. Now, if you're not completely familiar with the Fire Pro Wrestling series, it features wrestlers from around the world, and these are actual... Well, hold on. They are actual wrestlers from around the world during the time this game was made, but their names have been changed, so it's not exactly them. But if you're familiar with the characters from like New Japan, All Japan, Noah, for the time, at least overseas, then you'll recognize who these people are. And a few of them have wrestled in the United States as well. Now, there are a couple of US federations, the knockoff WWE and the knockoff WCW. And for these ones, they changed the colors and the outfits a little bit. Well, sometimes the outfits are the same, but they changed the colors. So again, with a keen eye, you can kind of tell who's who. Now, if you play the Japanese versions of these games, it is like the US color scheme. So if you want to play this on the import, play it as a Japanese version, that's fine. Just it won't be in English for you. And there's something about this pixel-based wrestling game that's existed for years. This series has been out for a long time. But it just played so well, even on the Game Boy Advance. It's not a button masher. You have to lock up, and then once you're locked up, as soon as you lock up, that's when you hit your button. Either your A or B button, or both buttons at the same time, and then one of the directions. And that'll do a different move for you. And you also have shoulder buttons too. One of them is to breathe, because you actually have to, breathe. If you don't breathe throughout the match, you get winded, and then you start, then you move slower, you're not as strong. Again, fun to see what moves they give them. They did their research on this game to find out, who's who and what's what, and, what kind of moves they do. So, a lot of effort to this game. You can make the opponents bleed. That's always kind of fun. And my favorite thing to do in any of the Fire Pro games is to do that critical. It's when you do a move that's so brutal that after a while, or depending on what kind of wrestler you're using, it just knocks them cold. Just knocks them stupid. And that's the best part. Now, although they do have different gameplay matchups, there's like one-on-one, there's a tournament mode, they have like death matches and stuff like that. The Battle Royal feature is my favorite part. I just do a Battle Royal and then just, beat up whoever happens to be in the ring. And you can either choose it to either, have it be, you have to pin them or make them submit, or you can throw them out of the ring. Not really over the top rope, just throw them out of the ring or roll them out of the ring, then they're eliminated. Fire Pro Wrestling for Game Boy Advance might be worth checking out. Oh, I've always got recommendations for NES games. Always got recommendations for NES games, and Air Fortress is a game I can't get enough of. It's an earlier game, it looks a little dated compared to most other NES games, but I just love this game so much. And super cheap to find, too, so that's always a benefit. When you're looking for NES games, you're like, oh, that game looks fun, and you look it up, it's $100. That's not going to be the case with Air Fortress. I think you're going to have a fun time with this game. It starts out as a shooter, side-scrolling shooter, a shmup, if you will. Not a lot of enemies to shoot, you're more just collecting items and collecting things that you'll need for when you go into these air fortresses. Now when you land your ship and go down the elevator, now it turns into a different part of the game. This is your exploration mode. Now you do have an energy meter there, that's going to use when you shoot something or when you fly around, because you can also float. But in doing that, you're going to use up more energy. You need to reserve as much energy as you can, because some of these later levels are huge. The idea, as you're making your way through this, is to basically blow up the air fortress. So you got to find the core. When you find the core, you blow it up. You have these bombs that you can use, or you can just keep shooting at it. It's fine. It's not really going to attack you back or anything like that. And then once you do that, you have to find your ship and escape immediately. Now, this first stage is very simple, because your ship is right there. But there are some stages where your ship is far, far away, so you got to blow up the core, and then you're against the timer to find out where your ship is to get out of there safely and on time. Air Fortress from HAL Laboratories, believe it or not. The people who brought you Kirby brought you Air Fortress. You might want to check it out. And again, cost efficient. You're going to love it. Well, you've heard of Balloon Fight, but have you heard of Balloon Kid? Well, this is Balloon Fight for the Game Boy. This is Game Boy Classic. This is your black and white Game Boy. And this one features kind of an adventure mode. There's you have your kind of Balloon Fight style too, but this one features kind of a side-scrolling, well, you're flying the opposite direction, was kind of weird. But it gives you a different kind of gameplay with the same features as Balloon Fight, as you have your balloons and you're collecting the other balloons and you're avoiding the obstacles and all that. I like the fact that you can actually release your balloons. You can let them go and then just turn into like a, where you're running around and jumping around. And no worries, you can get your balloons back. You just have to, you know, hit your button, and you'll start pumping up your balloons again, so you can start floating around again. A lot of similarities with Balloon Fight and Balloon Kid, I think is definitely worth checking out. Considering games for the Sega Master System, and I do love the Master System, I want to recommend Double Dragon on this one. And you're thinking, well, I already have Double Dragon, I've played Double Dragon, I have Double Dragon on NES. The NES version of Double Dragon is not the arcade version of Double Dragon. This one more resembles the arcade version of Double Dragon. I say resembles because, of course, it's not a one-to-one port. It's not exactly the same. But it's done very well. It's one of the better Double Dragon 1 ports, I think, is this one for the Sega Master System. I don't need to talk about Double Dragon a whole lot. I think it was one of the original side-scrolling beat-em-ups. It's one of the original games that look like this. You know, maybe without Double Dragon, maybe we wouldn't have Final Fight. Maybe there never would have been a Streets of Rage. I don't know. We maybe never would have had TMNT, the arcade game. I never thought about that. But either way you look at it, Double Dragon, it's a classic, very good, and plays extremely well on the Sega Master System. So if you have a Master System looking at building some games and you see Double Dragon, you're like, I don't need Double Dragon, I already got it for NES. Different style of game here. This one's more like the arcade version, and I love it for it. Well, I do love my puzzle games. Haven't really talked about one just yet, but we do have Wild Snake. This is for the Super Nintendo. Now, Wild Snake looks like Tetris. It looks like it's going to be another Tetris clone. Man, they've been doing Tetris clone ever since Tetris came out. We've had non-stop Tetris clones. And non-stop Tetris, too. This one plays a little bit differently. Yes, it's the same, you know, cylindrical, tall building style thing. Interesting enough, though, that when one snake touches another similar snake, the similar snake disappears and goes away. There's something, to me, oddly addicting about this game, and I don't know what it is. It's easy to just touch the other snake and, you know, make them nice and organized. The fun for me in this game, much like the Puyo games, is to stack it tall, see if I can stack it as high as I can, and then look for those combos. Look for those things where, well, that snake's eliminated, and then when the other snakes move into play, then it'll touch more snakes, and those snakes will be eliminated, and then that moves into play. You know, so things like that. It's just kind of fun to check out. Wild Snake is one of those games that you even saw on the rental shelf, and you're just like, no, I'm not renting that. But don't discount Wild Snake. I think it's a lot of fun. I am a huge TurboGrafx-16 fan and a huge Capcom arcade fan, and when Tiger Road was released and not on the NES, I was upset, but we got it on the TurboGrafx-16, good enough for me. And I'm sure the TurboGrafx-16 port of Tiger Road would have been better than the NES version. However, since you never got the NES version, and maybe you never saw this in the arcade, maybe you're not as familiar with it. Well, it's an awesome game. That's what I need to tell you about. Has kind of an Asian vibe to it, of course. Got some different weapons you can pick up and use as you need. And I don't know, it just, something about it, I think just the idea and the fun and the weaponry you can pick up and things like that, it just made it fun, and made it a fun game, and made it just fun to see and fun to play. I loved playing this in the arcade. We had it in our arcade when I was growing up. And if I wanted to play it at home, I'd play this version right here on the TurboGrafx-16, Tiger Road. Yeah, I definitely want to check it out. Well, we talked about Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. We could do a Game Boy Color game while we're at it, I suppose. When in doubt, Mr. Driller. When in doubt, Mr. Driller. Mr. Driller plays fanatically, awesomely, fantastically amazing on any console. Because of its simple gameplay, simple style, you could have made this for the Atari 2600 and it would have been just as fun of a game, in my opinion. I'm sure it would have worked, and maybe someone already did a homebrew, I don't know. Now, although I mostly play this game on the Dreamcast, the version on the Game Boy Color still plays very well, too. Now, Mr. Driller might remind you a little bit of Dig Dug. It's in the same Dig Dug universe, believe it or not. I believe this kid for Mr. Driller is actually the guy from Dig Dug's son, or something like that, as far as storyline goes. You're just working your way down. You can tell by the gameplay how to play this game if you've never played this game. You just gotta, you know, those things, the blocks, the bricks, will all dissipate when you touch them or when you drill on them, and with everything else falling on top of you, you got to make sure you don't get crushed. And how far can you make it? Oh, this is a super fun game. Not everybody's collecting for Atari 2600, but some of these video game stores and some conventions, you'll see boxes of Atari games. And you're like, well, okay, I've seen Pac-Man, I've heard about E.T., there's Asteroids again, there's Space Invaders again, but sometimes you'll find some games like Oink. There's a game called Oink. Well, it's based on the Three Little Pigs. Makes sense. You have 3 lives in video games. Why not the 3 lives be the 3 little pigs? Well, in Oink, there is the Big Bad Wolf down below, and he's blowing the house down brick by brick. And you have a bunch of bricks that you have to keep laying in place while he is blowing this down. Now, you cannot work faster than the wolf. You think you can for a while, but it gets to a point where you just can't keep up. And eventually, it'll happen. Eventually, the wolf will start to attack you and get you, and that's when he starts sucking you in. And once he gets you, you move on from there to the next life. Fun as a 1-player game, but man alive, is this a fantastic 2-player game, because the second controller plays as the wolf. So that makes this the most fun, is to play this as a couch co-op 2-player game. Of course it's couch co-op, it's Atari. Atari did not have the internet. Could you imagine the size of the modem the Atari would have if it was on the 2600? It would look like that Genesis thing where you actually have to lay the phone into the device. I don't know. But Oink for the Atari 2600 is one I think you should check out. Anything from Activision for Atari 2600 is usually going to be a pretty good game. The game's called Shadow Blasters from Sage's Creation. Now, if you have a Sega Genesis and you're collecting for it, you don't quite know what to grab, anything from Sage's Creation is probably gonna be pretty decent. I like this game quite a bit because my next door neighbor and I used to play it pretty regularly. Now, it may not be exactly on par with the tight play controls and ability of a Shinobi, for instance, but it is super, super good. You got 4 characters you can choose from, and each one represents a different element. And then from there, it is kind of your basic, you go through the stages, you can jump and attack, and then different characters have a different powered up attack as well as a special thing that they can do. They all play pretty much the same, but it's more on preference of maybe what your favorite element is, I suppose, in a game like this. I know I had a blast playing it. Get it? Blast? Because it's Shadow Blasters? Blast? Anyway. Super fun. Definitely doesn't get a lot of love, but I definitely wanted to highlight it. Moving on to the Super Nintendo, we have Combat Tribes. This game was one of my favorites in the arcade. Well, it takes that side-scrolling beat-em-up style, like a Final Fight or a Streets of Rage, but it's more room-based. Like, it's just like you're in the stage. You can just move left and right until all of the people are gone. What I liked about this was it wasn't just your basic punch and kick, which of course you have that too, but you could also give them, like, you know, grab them by the ankles, give them a giant swing, basically, or jump on the back of their head once they're down, or start pummeling them once they're down. Well, at least you can in the arcade. A couple of moves and effects, let's just say, have been dulled down a little bit for the Super Nintendo clean audience. But super fun in the arcade, and it plays very, very well on the Super Nintendo as well. A game like this, fun as a 1-player, but even better as a 2-player. My friends and I would rent this pretty regularly back in our high school days. Different stages might have different enemies as well, and it's kind of fun to see where you're going next and what enemies will be there next. And each one has a final boss that'll, you know, make it so you can move on to the next stage. Super fun game. I do like this game quite a bit. I honestly didn't know how well Atari 2600 would be received in a series like this, but when everyone talking about Oink in the last video, let's do some more 2600 games. This one's called Demon Attack. In Demon Attack, my story behind this was my father came home, my dad came home with like 8 brand new Atari games. And this was rare for us because this came from a time when I might get a game for birthday, I might get a game for Christmas, and then with the Atari 2600, it was kind of like, well, whenever, maybe if it's on sale. Well, during the crash of 1983, my dad came home with a pile of games. They were all probably just, you know, $1 or $2 or something like that. and one of the games happened to have been Demon Attack, and it was the game I played the most of those other games. I don't even remember what the other games were. I think one of them was Atlantis, but this was the one that I played the most. A little like a Space Invaders, kind of. It only has 3 enemies on screen, but when you eliminate one, then, you know, a backup one comes into play. And then once all of those enemies are gone, then it moves on kind of to the next phase, where there might be different enemies might have different attack abilities. These games were a dime a dozen back in these days. Well, I mean, quite literally, during the liquidation stock. But this one just seemed to have stood out among others, and I think other Atari collectors would agree. If you're collecting for Atari 2600, you don't have this one, I would recommend you check out Demon Attack. And really quickly, have you played my game Yeah Yeah Beavis 2? It's on Dreamcast, it's on NES. It's also available on Switch and Steam. If you want to play it for free on Switch or Steam, I'm going to be flashing a code on screen in the next 30 seconds. Because along with these great video game recommendations, I also want to recommend Factor. Well, it's just about my favorite thing in the world. Fresh, never frozen, prepared by chefs, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your front door. And 2 minutes in the microwave, all of them, just 2 minutes in the microwave. That's it. You know, especially if you have kids, summer gets super busy, you don't want to cook, you don't even want to turn the oven on. These are perfect for this. And I love the fact I can leave some at work, so I don't have to worry about it. In fact, let's go there now. It's right here, vegan mushroom masala, onion risotto. I'm not even vegan conscious. Conscience? I'm using my microwave here because my microwave at home is disgusting. But 2 minutes in the microwave. No way are you ready for this reveal. Oh my God. The risotto. Are they gonna put a green bean in there? One bite and everything. These have no right to be as delicious as a 2 minute microwavable thing. I'm not just saying that. I would legit order this at a restaurant. It's so good. And these smoothies rule, 100% plant-based. Head to Factor75.com right now, use code JohnRiggs50 and get 50% off your first Factor box. And with that, how about a game for the PlayStation 1? Remember when company logos could look like this? What happened? Well, this game is called Spider the Video Game. Spider the Video Game. It was one of the first games I remember seeing on the PlayStation 1 that was a 2D side-scrolling game, but not really. I think they kind of call this 2.5D. I mean, it's still a 2D game, right? But because the screen rotates or can, it makes it kind of 3D, but you're still kind of, you know, moving left and right and stuff like that. And it just looked cool, and the fact that you play as a spider was even cooler, I think. Bunch of stages to go through in this game, a killer soundtrack, one of the most underrated soundtracks in PlayStation 1 history, in my opinion. It's just fun, and it just looks cool. And the fact that you play as a spider when you're crawling up things and crawling upside down and stuff like that, too. What a fun idea. What a great game. A little bit earlier of a game, I think it came out in '96 on this one. It came out about a year after the PlayStation 1 came out. So maybe a little bit on the undiscovered side of the PS1 collection. But check out Spider. I think it's a lot of fun. What, Donkey Kong for the Game Boy? I'm actually going to talk about this? Well, yeah, because I'm learning and discovering that a lot of people haven't even tried Donkey Kong on the classic Game Boy. And this game is also Super Game Boy enhanced. So if you have a Super Game Boy and you're playing it through your Super Nintendo, you know, then it's going to have, you know, extra colors, maybe even, you know, quality sound. And trust me, I was a late bloomer to this game too. I did not play this game when it first came out. I came into it later. And when I did, I kicked myself for not playing it sooner. I love the fact that this game starts out with the classic Donkey Kong stages. Now, you're still using the new control style and everything like that, which you learn later, so never mind the stuff I'm doing. I didn't know about all this until, you know, there's little tutorials later saying, hey, by the way, you can also do, like, these little backflips and stuff. But I was like, oh, how fun. You just go through the classic Donkey Kong stages, and when you complete it, or complete the 4, that's when the real game kicks into play, where you have these stages where you have to pick up the key and go through the door. And there's going to be some extra items you can get along the way. There's going to be bonus, you know, extra live chances and stuff like that too. Quick, fun, puzzle platforming style stages. There's going to be a bunch of them. Fun to see what you can do, where you can go, how to get through the stages. Got to make sure that key, you got to grab that to go through the door. There's even boss battles in this game as well, where you're fighting Donkey Kong on Donkey Kong's terms. It's usually the case, right? I know it is a Nintendo IP, and it's Donkey Kong of all things, and you play as Mario of all things. but this game is my favorite game for the Game Boy, and if you haven't checked it out yet for any reason, look into it, man. I've only done a couple of these videos, but haven't talked about anything for the Game Gear, and one of my favorite puzzle games for the Game Gear is Baku Baku Animal. Now this game is probably available on something else too, but I know it from the Game Gear. Well, at first glance, yep, it's a puzzle game. It's a Puyo game, it's a Tetris game, it's not Tetris, it's not Puyo, not so much. If anything, it plays a little bit more like a Pack Attack, if you ever played Pack Attack, but let me explain. So you have fruit or animals. That's what you're dropping down, fruit or animals, and you have to match the animal with the fruit. And when you do, the animal will eat the fruit, and that's how you make those pieces disappear. Simple by design, but man, I love playing this game still today. This game, like Puyo, the concept, what you want to do, because you're also battling against the computer here, the idea is to stack them tall and proud, but then look for those combos. Like, you know, set up some combos, so once this thing gets eliminated, it'll drop down, and it'll cause another chain reaction, which will drop down, and it might cause another chain reaction. So stack it tall, stack it proud, and then look for those huge combos, because that's how you can really, you know, destroy the day, ruin the day of the CPU next to you. If I was ever to build my own puzzle game and rip off another game, it may be something pretty close to this. That's a compliment to me. I don't know, it sounds like a compliment to me. Baku Baku Animal for your Game Gear. Baku Baku Animal for your Game Gear on this one. Talk about penny racers for the Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64 does not lack racing games. Everyone always talks about, you know, that San Francisco Rush, or they talk about the Cruising USA, and of course Mario Kart. But Penny Racers is kind of fun. Penny Racers is a pretty fun, you know, kind of driving game, a little cutesy style, a little top-heavy, where sometimes you turn these corners, you start rolling around a little bit, little items you can use to take advantage of, you know, trying to get to that first place position, different camera angles you could take advantage of as well. It, at the end of the day, is just a cutesy, fun, cartoony driving game. But Penny Racers for the Nintendo 64. Check it out. I'm a huge fan of the Sega Master System. Ghost House was one I enjoyed playing, even though I never had a direction on how to play it. I mean, you know how to play, you don't care how to play it. You can jump and you can punch, that's all you need to know. You can explore. Explore, that's right, you can go in these doors and stuff like that and punch the enemies and move on, and I don't know, I just like exploring. I just like going around. I never tried to, this is one game I've played several times. Of course, I'm talking about it now. You know, I like this game. I've never really tried beating it. I just kind of played it for a while, and I was like, oh, okay, that's good. And I like having games like that. I don't need to beat every game I ever play. I just want to have fun with it. And this is one of those games, yeah, you know, maybe one of these days, sure, maybe I'll actually spend the effort, you know, stream it on Twitch or something like that, with the support of the people in the comments, but yeah, it's just fun. And Ghost House has existed on other consoles too, but, you know, I have it for Master System, so that's the one to play it on. Well, I do love my NES, and Xerxes is one that doesn't seem to get enough love. And I think it's because the cover for the game, the label art, is just like starry sky background and then the word Xerxes, and it doesn't really tell you a whole lot. But there's a lot going on with this game. Starts out as a platformer, and there's so many doors you can go in, and so many things you can go in, and of course, at the end of the game, like life, they're all trying to hustle you out of your money. Whenever you get anything, there's like, hey, I'll give this for you, I'll sell you this, I'll sell you that. Give me money, I'll tell you information. There's a lot of that going on with this game too. But the game starts out like this side-scrolling platformer, and you're looking for a kind of like mid-boss. The mid-boss is going to give you the star, which is kind of acts as your key to get to the dungeon. In this game they call it like the mechanics. I mean, I don't know. And then it's going to be more side-scrolling. But it's kind of nice because afterwards, kind of in the middle of these dungeons, it turns into a side-scrolling shooter, which is kind of fun. So, you know, it changes up the gameplay just a little bit. Not bad. And they have a little bit more exploration of the dungeons, and you can go up and down these things. There's different doors you can go in, stuff like that. And then it turns into another shooter, kind of, where you have to defeat the boss, the mechanic, they call it in this game. And then between the next world, it turns into another shooter. So it's a little bit of a platformer, a little bit of a side-scrolling shooter. It's a lot of fun. I like this game quite a bit. Again, another game I'm super nostalgic for. Hudson Soft, you can't go wrong there. Xerxes is one you might want to check out. If you haven't done so yet, it's worth looking at. What, a tennis game? I'm going to talk about a tennis game when I'm talking about the TurboGrafx-16, one of my favorite consoles of all time. Of all the great games, I'm talking about a tennis game. Well, let me explain. World Court Tennis, and what makes World Court Tennis so great, believe it or not, is there is a quest mode. It's an RPG mode. Yeah, you can play singles, yeah, you can play doubles, but there's an RPG element. This is years before Golf Quest. Or wait, Golf Story, or other things like that. This may be the first of its style. Of course, you can just take a sport, put it as a video game, and there you go. But this game added a little something special to it. You're walking around, and then when it gets into a fight scene, like a random battle, well, that's when you play tennis. That's when you play tennis to defeat these enemies. Let's call them. You wouldn't think it by looking at the cover of this game. You wouldn't even think there's an RPG mode with World Court Tennis. But there happens to be, and that's why I have to talk about this game, because so many people don't know that. Trust me, I'm not the one who gravitates towards sports games either, especially not tennis. But when you add an RPG element to it, I'm interested. Starting off with a super fun game from Sunsoft for the Nintendo 64, this one is Chillion Twist. So many great 64 games that are out there, but they always get kind of lost in the shuffle because everyone's all about Mario, or everyone's all about something else, you know, all these other platformers, you know. Well, this is another 3D platformer, but with a twist. A Chillion Twist, if you will, kind sir. Yeah, that's right. You have your giant tongue in this, and that is the twist. You can, with your tongue, loop up the enemies, if you will, and then spit them back out to use that as a weapon. You can also use your tongue to go across these beams, or these posts, or these poles, whatever you want to call them. And then on top of that, it's a pretty decent 3D platformer for the Nintendo 64. Again, you know, there's only so many Nintendo 64 games that are out there, which means there's also so many platformers that are out there. But this one, for some reason, gets lost in the shuffle more often than not. And I don't know why not. It's not that it's super hard to find, it's not that it's super valuable or anything, it's just, I think it's kind of fun. And there's a couple of them, only showcasing the first one in this video. Maybe we'll talk about Chillion Twist 2 in a future video. But in the first one, check out the first one first. I think it's worth playing. If you're looking for a great running action style game for your Super Nintendo, look no further than Sky Blazer. It's one of the best. Now, if you've never even heard of Sky Blazer, the box art doesn't even come to mind. That's totally okay, because this game is already available for you, waiting for you to check out. And you can tell already just by looking at the graphics, the colors, the music to an extent as well, how the gameplay looks and feels. It plays even better. Super smooth controls on this one. I love it. Now, if you're familiar with the game Hook, I believe, to the best of my ability, they're both from Sony, ImageSoft, or whatever that thing's called. It might be the same creator. Like the guy who made Hook made this game too, but Hook just runs so slowly. This game runs at a more appropriate speed, the speed you're used to for Super Nintendo games, to make sure that you're playing them the way that you like to play them, to make sure that you're going through the game the way you want to go through this game. It is your just basic, you run, you jump, you platform, your attack, you have your little special, wind blade thingy or other. You can use that as an attack as well to kind of, launch towards enemies and stuff like that. The game's called Sky Blazer. It's a wonderful, wonderful game, definitely worth checking out, I think. This game is called Exile. It is available for the Sega Genesis. It's also on the Turbo CD. So if you have a TurboGrafx-16 CD add-on, which I didn't know anyone that did when I was growing up, well, it plays fine on that too, but you know what? It plays perfectly well on the Sega Genesis. In fact, as much as I love the Turbo CD, I played this game on the Sega Genesis. I still relate to this game being a Sega Genesis game. Even though it was available on other platforms, still all the same, Huge fan of Exile. It starts out with like you're walking around, and you're in the desert. You're talking to people, above screen. It looks like it's going to be like an RPG style of game, right? Well, and you'd be right to an extent. However, when you get into the battle sequence, like when you get to the part that you're actually like defeating enemies, then it turns into this side-scrolling kind of run and slash style game. Downward thrust available in this game too. When you jump and then hit down and attack, you get that downward thrust. If a game features a downward thrust, it is a game worth playing, kind sir. Nostalgic for the soundtrack to this game as well, and just the overall feel of this game, I think is fine. And when you're walking around this overworld part, you're not going to get attacked by enemies randomly or anything like that. Nothing like that. No random battles. More like an ease style. Like when you're in town, you're talking to people fine, and then when you're out and about, doing the I'm gonna kill some enemies now, then it's gonna go to that kind of side-scrolling view where, the maze, go inside these doors, in and out of these doors, maybe a little bit maze-like. You might get lost a little bit, but nothing too bad to worry about. Definitely build up your levels, build up your, abilities and stuff like that. Yeah, Exile is just a fun game. And again, it's also available on the Turbo CD. If you want to go that route, totally fine. In fact, there's 2 of them on the Turbo CD. But this one, Exile for the Sega Genesis, it's one of my favorite Genesis games for sure. Oh my goodness, I couldn't wait to play Jumping Flash. It was one of the demos available when you first bought a PlayStation 1 when it first came out, and then the rest of the game, super amazing, in my opinion. Now, it looks a little archaic by today's standards, a little antiquated by today's standards. Well, you gotta remember, this was over 20 years ago, and it was one of the first kind of 3D games I was really into. Like, it was like a 3D platformer, but it wasn't Mario 64. This was a different style of 3D platformer. You play as a robotic rabbit. It's a robotic bunny that can shoot the other enemies. Gotta love that too. And then with your double jump, when you jump, you're fine. When you double jump, you jump higher, but then you kind of look down to see where you're about to land on. And from there, you can pounce on enemies, you can shoot them as well, and then find the other items you need to do. It's just one of those, grab all the items and then move through the exit. This style of game has been around a long, long time, but not like this. I just love the colors. I love the music to this game. I just love the fact that it's like, it was super 3D for its time, for PlayStation 1 even. I would not mind an updated Jumping Flash, and I think they made 2 of them as far as I know for the PlayStation 1. But Jumping Flash, the first one, had a lot of fond memories playing this game, and I think it's even fun today. Now, I think you might like it too. I think it's worth for you to check out as well. But huge fan of Jumping Flash. And just the idea, just the jumping around, just that you can, get new add-ons and get new, weapons to use against other enemies. The other stages look cool when you move on to the new stages. There are boss battles in this game. You can fight these giant bosses in this game, which is always kind of cool too. So, Jumping Flash for the PlayStation 1 should be high on your list of games. If you're looking for PlayStation 1, collecting for PlayStation 1, look out for this game, would you? How about a game by Rare that features underwear? Well, this is where It's Mr. Pants comes in. Yes, there's a game called It's Mr. Pants. It is a puzzle game by Rare for the Game Boy Advance. Now, one of my favorite puzzle games. I can't even describe it as a different style of puzzle game because I can't think of another puzzle game that this plays like. I have talked about this game before on my channel a couple of times when it comes to puzzle games and Game Boy Advance and stuff like that. I just love this game, I really do. You need to make all of the colored blocks parallelograms, squares or rectangles. That's all you're looking for, and they have to be a perfect square or a perfect rectangle, and it will make those blocks disappear. You'll have these other pieces you can use, and you can place the different colors on the other colors. Now, you cannot put like a yellow block on top of a yellow piece or anything like that, but you can put yellow on top of green, and when you do that, then it will make those squares and rectangles that we were just talking about, and that's what makes them disappear. Now, first few stages, easy going for sure, but later on stages, it'll be like a picture of a train, and you have to put all these little pieces intricately in the right order to place them on the thing to make them disappear. Now, I have gone all the way through this game, I've beaten this game, and later on in this game, if you ever get super stuck, there will be a little helpful guide saying, well, tell you where to put the first piece, and sometimes that's all you need, that step in the right direction to work on the rest of the level and stuff like that too. Love this game. It's Mr. Pants, looking for a unique puzzle game. Check it out. Game Boy Advance on this one. If you're collecting for Game Boy Classic, if you're collecting for like the DMG style, why don't you check out Batman for the Game Boy from Sunsoft? Different from the NES version of Batman. Most Batman games are fairly decent. This one's a pretty good one too. Batman is known for not shooting enemies. Anyway, in this game you have a gun, and you shoot the enemies. That's how you get rid of these guys. It was an earlier Game Boy game, so, you know, bold colors, big bullets, definitely let you know which blocks have the item or the upgrade or the health or things like that. And it just plays like a decent kind of run and gun shooter game. Classic for the Game Boy, but still a fun game. And yeah, it's Batman. Can't go wrong with the Batman games. Something worth checking out. Shouldn't run you a whole lot of money. It's just fun. That's at the end of the day, that's all you're looking for. It's just fun. I'm a pretty big fan of the Sega Master System. There's a few games worth checking out. Cloudmaster is one of them. Cloudmaster. I almost called it Cloutmaster. I mean, you could, I suppose. Anyway, Cloudmaster is a shooter. It's a side-scrolling shoot, like a space shooter. But with the gimmick of you're a boy on a cloud and you're shooting the enemies. It has a bit of a lore to it as well. It has a little bit of backstory. One of those kind of like, you know, like from ancient stories or something. Kind of fun that it would be a shooter that's not just outer space. It's, you know, not like, you know, you're working in World War II or anything like that. But you're a boy on a cloud and you're shooting things like bowls of ramen. Or noodles, whatever it is, or you know, these other flying creature things. Fun game, and this game is available on other consoles as well. I remember it best on Sega Master System. I know it's available on other stuff too, but yeah, there you go. Cloudmaster. If you're collecting for Sega Master System, might want to look out for it. I can go on and on about the NES, because NES is NE best, and do not misconstrue Mappy Land being a children's game. It is super, super fun for all ages. Now, the box art looks cartoony, the graphics look cartoony, but man, is this a fun game. I'm a big fan of Mappy in the arcade, but this Mappy Land turns it into like a stage progression game where each level you have to collect all the items to move on to the next stage, and sometimes, you know, the enemies get in your way, you have some distractions that you can use for the enemies as well. Different stages have different themes to them. And then different worlds have a different thing that you're collecting too, whether it be cheese or wedding rings or Christmas trees or something. It just keeps on going on and on. So, great game, fun game, use the trampolines to your advantage. Again, looks like a kid's game. It's totally not, and I'm pretty sure once you start playing this game for a little bit, you'll get sucked in like I did back when it first came out. Mappy Land is the one you're looking out for the NES, in this video anyway. Well, with the announcement of the Atari 2600 Plus, an HDMI console where you can play Atari games on it, what about another Atari 2600 game? I'm a big fan of the 2600. This game's called Moonsweeper. Moonsweeper blew my mind as a child. This is one of the games that we had when I was growing up anyway, because it starts off as kind of like a space shooter. Okay, so you're going around, you don't have a whole lot of room to maneuver, but you're shooting these things out of the way, you're shooting these asteroids or meteors or comets or whatever these things that are flying at you. That's fine. What blew my mind as a kid was they have these planets coming through you as well. And if you like move to the planet, then it's like you kind of go down to the planet, and now you're on the planet. And that was crazy for me. You pick up the people and destroy the towers and stuff like that while you're on the planet as well. Depending on how you control as well, you can shoot the enemies, and you can also hold down and shoot to shoot like the UFOs and stuff that are coming down at you. And then in the over space part, I guess you'd call it, the down and attack little force field. You know, move through the things if you can't shoot them in time. I don't know. I just had a fun time with this game. Moonsweeper is the name of this game here. How about a super obscure Atlas game for the TurboGrafx-16? This game is called Summer Assault. Think Somersault, but it's Summer Assault. It starts off with asking for your birthday. Why? I don't know. And then when you play the game, that's right, I'm an Aries. When you play the game, you're this weird pipe thing that shoots either, depending on how your pipe is laid, no, do not laugh. Do not laugh. Depending on how your pipe is positioned, I don't even know what you're supposed to be in this. you're playing as an AC duct? I have no idea. But that's how you shoot as well. You can, like, you know, jump up on the platform, jump down, so you're either on the ceiling, on the floor, you know, kind of slinky style. If they made a slinky shooter, this would be that game. Interesting enough, fun enough, and I think it's definitely unique. Unique to say the least. Thank you, Atlas, for a game like this, because why wouldn't we have a game like this from Atlas? There are other upgrades you can pick up too to increase your firepower, increase your speed. Sometimes you pick up something that makes you go all, you know, like where their controls are opposite. Yeah, whatever they could do. Even boss battles in this game too. Can you believe it? Giant slinky game, and you got boss battles and stuff like that. This game is insane, and it's called Summer Assault, and it's for the TurboGrafx 16, and it's definitely worth at least a peek if you can manage it. Starting off with Super Nintendo, I am more nostalgic for Lagoon than I am Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Reason being, Lagoon, as far as I remember, was the only Zelda-type game we had on the Super Nintendo before The Legend of Zelda came out. Now you got your story, the water's poisoned or something like that, never mind about all that. It plays a bit like a Legend of Zelda style game, however, if you're familiar with the Ys series, you'll see a lot of the Ys similarities in Lagoon. I mean, yes, there's a lot of talking to people, talking to the townsfolk. You can, you know, grab your items and your weaponry and stuff like that, and you know, you're gonna build up from there and everything. And the fighting style, well, it's fine. It's, you know, your sword isn't nearly long enough, but that's okay. You can manage with, you know, how the distance of your sword. You can jump in this game, that's good news. See, you can't jump in Legend of Zelda. Well, I guess you can with that special item, but still, this game is slightly linear. What I mean by that is you kind of go from, you know, you're in one area and then you go through the cave, and then you go through the next area, then you go through the next cave, then you know what I mean, from there, you know, then you go in the castle, and you know, more of a maze than puzzle solving, unlike Zelda in Lagoon. I also like the fact that even in the dungeons, if you get hit and you stand still for a bit, your health will slowly regenerate. Now, you don't start with much health at the beginning of this game, so you gotta definitely watch yourself. But I love me some Lagoon. I definitely would think it's worth checking out, even today. Well, if it says Atlas, that's good news for me. Super Dodgeball Advance was the first Game Boy Advance game I purchased when I first got my Game Boy Advance. Now, if you're familiar with Super Dodgeball on the NES, it's that, but the continuation of. They even kind of reference it a little bit, some of the same songs a little bit. I mean, it's dodgeball. You just, you know, throw it at your opponents and hopefully they don't catch it and chuck it back at you. But the idea that you can run to build up momentum and then your characters have like a special throw they can do, that's always the fun part of the Super Dodgeball games. One thing you can do in this one that you can do in the arcade but not the NES version is you can send your other players, like if you're holding the ball, that's who you're controlling, you can send the other players like to charge as well, and that way you can either use it as a distraction or to, you know, pass it to them while they're also up in the air to do their maneuvers and stuff like that. Super Dodgeball for the NES is one of those games I can pick up and play whenever. I usually play through it, you know, 2 or 3 times a year just because you can. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna play through Super Dodgeball. And this one's a lot like that. If you're looking for some great pick up and play Game Boy Advance games, yes, there is kind of a story mode, but you can also just, you know, play Exhibition or whatever. Yeah, Super Dodgeball Advance, I think it's totally decent. Whenever I talk about old arcade games I grew up with, or classic Atari 2600 games I really loved, Blueprint comes up pretty regularly. And I figured I'd showcase Blueprint on the Atari 2600. It plays not exactly like the arcade game, and I'll showcase that here in a second, because instead of having you have your blueprint, that's the thing down below, you have to build the gun to shoot the monster that's chasing your girlfriend, is basically the story of my life. What? No, it's just, that's how this game works. But instead of, you know, just collecting literally any piece and putting it on a blueprint, you have to pick up the pieces in order so they stack from low to high. And the more this game progresses, the more pieces you have to pick up. So that's how this game works out anyway. I think the Atari version is a lot more difficult than the arcade version, only because you have to remember where the things are. And if you pick up you try to go into a house to pick up the piece, and it's not there, it turns into a bomb. And when you finally build the cannon, you have to shoot, at least at first, the slowest bullet ever to time it properly so it hits the monster. And this is the worst part of the game. This one takes the longest. It really does. But I still think it's a fine port of the game Blueprint. Again, I prefer the arcade version, but the one at home, this Atari 2600 version, it's not so bad, and I still enjoy it today. Can you tell me what this game is before the title screen kicks in? Kind of a weird, coolish opening cinematic here. I got turned into a monkey. This game is the Japanese version. Hold on, let me switch it to the US version. Here we go, Toki. Toki is the name of this game. Sorry about that. It auto-loaded the Japanese version for some reason. So in Toki, you play as this spitting ape, but it's just like a kind of side-scrolling, a little bit slower moving, so there is no run button, but that's fine. You don't really need it in this game. I think this game works just fine without it. There is an NES version, and there is an arcade version. This one is different from both of those. The NES version is more based on the arcade version, while this one is a standalone version of the game Toki itself. And Toki kind of came back, like for the Switch, semi-recently, like, you know, in the last few years. But this is the Sega Genesis version, and if you're like, oh, I already played Toki at the arcade, I already played Toki on the NES. Oh, the Genesis version, I'm sure it's the same thing, just with better graphics or whatever. It's not the case. It is a same Toki, but it is its own game. It is its own uniqueness to play this game. And I like it. It's just fun, jump around, you know, you pick up different, you know, weapons to spit. Different spitting abilities. Yeah, it's Toki. It's fine. I like this one. I'm going to take a quick break while we have Gemma talking about one of her favorite games.
So, the game I've picked is Einhander on the PlayStation 1. Unfortunately, we didn't get a release here in PAL regions, but Japan and you guys in North America did. As a tidbit of information, it's very, very cheap to buy if you want to get it in Japan. I'm waiting for my copy to arrive and I paid the grand sum of £21. So what exactly is Einhander? It is a unique side-scrolling shoot-'em-up game, and I absolutely love the soundtrack. Listen to some of this music. Not only that, I'm notoriously bad at these kinds of games. However, in Einhander, I feel like there's a bit more of an ebb and flow that makes me feel that little bit more powerful. Why? I don't know. It's just one of those games that feels fantastic. Some of the cool features in this is that your ship has this weird rotating arm that is able to grab new weapons from different enemies that you kill, so you can constantly evolve your weapons as you're flying through awesome, awesome, awesome Neon City cyberpunk-esque backgrounds. Everything looks really great, and I love the way the camera shifts into that weird isometric 2.5D graphical style. So Einhander's music is fantastic, it looks absolutely phenomenal, it is fast, I feel good at the game, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm super excited for my copy to arrive, but in the meantime, you guys need to check it out.
Thank you much, and make sure you check out Gemma's channel as well. Fantastic channel, all the game hunting, and you'll definitely find some hidden gems on her channel, no doubt indeed. Here's an interesting Game Boy Color game called Looney Tunes Twubble. Now in this game you play the role of Sylvester, the cat actually. You kind of play the role of the bad guy in a way. And interesting to point out, here's why I wanted to point this game out, was because the first part, it's like a run and chase and try not to get hit. You're chasing Tweety, you're not going to catch Tweety, you're just going to go, it's just what leads you to go through the stage as quickly as you can. But the alternate stages in this game play like Solstice or Equinox, or there's a few games that are like this. But I just thought it was interesting to see, like, I wish the whole game was like this. But I was like, wait a minute, I know this gameplay style. I know this idea. I mean, literally, like, where you jump on a block and hit the button to collect the block for later. This, when I saw this, I picked this up on a blind pickup. This was like a few years ago now. And I was like, wait a minute, I know this. This is kind of fun. I wish the whole game was like this, but cool to see that they have this part of the game included in Looney Tunes Twubble. Is the name of this game of all things. If you're looking out for Sega Master System, gotta check out Rastin. Rastin, I think, is a decent port of the arcade game, and I was a huge fan of the arcade game, played it all the time at my local Tiger Mart on Nob Hill Boulevard in Yakima here. I just thought the music was the coolest thing for the time, the sound, the graphics, everything about the game Rastin in the arcade was like the coolest thing ever for me. It was just like, you know, futuristic, but it was like still like Conan the Barbarian, basically, right? And although the level design isn't exactly like the arcade version, I still think the Sega Master System version plays extremely well. For the NES, one of my absolute favorite NES games, Kickle Cubicle. Can't talk highly enough of this game. I wish we had an updated version of this game. Like a puzzle game. It's a puzzle game. You play as this cutest guy ever, and you have to shoot these little blob things, turn them into ice cubes, to push them off into the water to create bridges, to get to those bags of, the red bags. Whatever's in them, I don't care. That's the point of the game, that's the goal of the game. It's fun just to see how many levels there are. There's a ton of levels in this game, so it'll keep you playing for quite a while, really. Every once in a while, when you rescue the people that come up to you and chat with you, I always kind of liked that. I thought that was like really fun. Along with your ice breath ability, you can also create these pillars, and these pillars will protect you, or later on it might prevent you from blocking into something, or things like that. Along with just putting them where you need to be, so you can again turn them into ice blocks to push them and create the paths that you need to complete these levels here. And this game even has a few bosses in the game too. There's a few bosses in this game, so have that ability, have that fun. Kickle Cubicle, super addicting to me. Can't get enough of it. Absolutely love it. I think you'll like it too. And her name is Princess Pumpa. Princess Pumpa. Love that name. If you happen to be collecting for the TurboGrafx 16 Crater Maze, might be pretty cool. I do like Crater Maze, and I want to showcase it really quickly. There's a few other games for other consoles that are kind of like this, especially in Japan. Not as much in America. There was one on the Game Boy Classic, like the Alien game. But in this game, you collect all the items, much like a Kickle Cubicle, to get through the stages. But you also have the ability to create these holes, these craters. And then when the enemy falls in them, you can bury them, and that defeats them. Now, they might come back later, but it'll actually make it so they won't bother you for at least a while or a moment or a something. And plenty of stages to keep you playing throughout this game as well. A lot going on with this game. Fun to see, and Crater Maze for the TurboGrafx 16, it's pretty decent. So if you already have the Bonk games, you already have like the Keith Courage and the whatever else, you already have Splatterhouse, yeah, why not check out Crater Maze? Might be fun for you. I know not everyone is collecting Sega CD, but one of my absolute favorite games. The game's called Panic. That's all it is. It's called Panic. You play as this boy. Sometimes you play as a dog. And the idea is when you hit a button, whatever room you happen to be in, it either does a funny cartoon that says, well, that's not the right answer, or it turns into something else. And then and it makes you move on to the next stage. Sometimes it's just kind of fun to see what will happen. It's like, well, that's the wrong button, but you got a little cartoon out of it. That's kind of fun. And then sometimes, when you move on to the next stage, you're like, oh, no, I want to go back and, see the other things too. And this game will just, sometimes there's multiple ways out. So there's multiple ways to get back in, if that makes sense. Like, one button will lead you to this room, or one button will lead you to that room. So it's a high replayability factor. Like I said, my kids play this game all the time because, again, you don't really die in this game. Well, there's a couple of parts where you get a game over much later in the game. But for the most part, you just see the cartoon, it plays out, giggle about it. Very, very, very inspired by Monty Python. Sometimes you'll get these like little cutscenes. Sometimes a building will blow up for fun. It's highly inspired by Monty Python, especially Terry Gilliam's cartoons. But Panic for the Sega CD, definitely check it out. It's one that it blew my mind that it even existed in the United States. Starting off with a Sega game on a Nintendo console. That's right, Game Boy Advance featured Choo Choo Rocket, a classic favorite puzzle game on the Dreamcast, now available on your Game Boy Advance, and done very well. If you're not familiar with Choo Choo Rocket, you have these mice that will just kind of walk in the direction that they're facing, and then if they hit a wall, they'll, turn the corner. But you can put these pieces on the ground, these arrows, and then those arrows will dictate where the mice are going, and you have to get them into these rocket launcher things. Sega was so fun during this time. This late 90s Sega, it was just amazing. I just absolutely love it. Yeah, this late 90s, early 2000s Sega, fun. I just love watching them all, just walk single file into this line and, go around all these corners and stuff like that, too. And if you make a mistake, no worries. You can just back up and do it again. Unlimited lives. Every once in a while, there might be, an enemy or an obstacle in the way, too. There's like, well, I can't do it this way, so you will find the right way eventually. Plenty of options here. I don't know, this game is just hypnotizing to me. I absolutely love this game. It's called Choo Choo Rocket. This is on the Dreamcast. I'm showing the one here on the Game Boy Advance. Speaking of Sega, probably my favorite Genesis game is Haunting, starring Polterguy. Yeah, it was during a time where, everything had to be a cool dude with an attitude, that Bart Simpson type character. And this guy, how cool, you're a ghost, you're dead. And you have to haunt these items in this giant house to scare the family into moving into a different house. You have to keep on scaring them. By possessing all these random items that are around each room, wherever the person happens to be. There's a mom, dad, brother and sister, and wherever room happens to be, you can inhabit or inhabit these items here to to make them scared. It's fun to see the creativity of what could happen or how it's going to happen. When eventually they'll get scared enough, so they'll move out. And you have to do that one by one for all 4 members of the family here. Now, if you run out of your ectoplasm, that's what's haunting these items. You'll go into the underworld and you'll get your, get your refill here. And then when you're back at it, you're just, right back to work. Just scaring these people out of the house here. Again, just the creativity alone makes this game worth playing. Super, super fun. I'm a big fan of it. Now, if you're talking games for value, like price-wise, this one might be going up in price. I don't even know the current price of it. Is it $50, $60? I don't know. There's 1,000 ways to play 1,000 games. But do check this game out. I think it's a lot of fun. Now, the NES might be my favorite, but I grew up with the Atari 2600, and if you're not into Atari and you're just like, man, there's so many Atari games out there, and to you, most of them are junk, there's a lot of great Atari 2600 games out there, and one of them is this game here called No Escape. I thought it was pretty creative, and it's still a game I want to basically rip off the idea of for a homebrew for myself. I'll say that out loud, because I'm not ashamed. What happens with No Escape is you shoot above you to hit the ceiling tiles and have them drop onto the enemies. And that's how you eliminate them. So, you look at it and you're like, it's a little bit like a Space Invaders or something like that. I don't know. But no, you have to hit the ceiling and drop the tiles, and then those things will eliminate the enemy. You do that until they're all gone, you get all the bonus points for all the tiles you didn't hit, and then the challenge also comes from not just the sporadic movement of some of these enemies later on, but if you hit an enemy, then they multiply. So if you hit an enemy directly, they multiply. You have to eliminate them by dropping these pieces down on top of them. I just thought it was a fun idea, something pretty unique. The game's called No Escape 2600. Yeah, check it out sometime. Well, there's a few Flintstones games on a few different consoles, and this one for Game Boy Color is definitely interesting. You may not have even known this was a thing until I tell you about the Flintstones Burger Time in Bedrock. This game is Burger Time featuring the Flintstones characters. You play as Fred Flintstone here. In lieu of Pepper, you have a club that you wallop these enemies with. Huge difficulty factor. You move way too slow, the ladders are way too small, so yeah, prepare to not last very long in this game, maybe. You might find a nice groove with how you move and with the enemies and all that. You're gonna have to with a game like this. But yeah, if you're into Burger Time and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't know there was a Burger Time game on Game Boy Advance featuring the Flintstones, well, there is, and you can play it right now. It's just kind of fun to see like what other enemies might pop up and everything. It does not have that Burger Time mechanic where if an enemy is on a piece and you drop it down, it drops down multiple levels. I wish it did that at least, but this one doesn't. It's all good. It's still kind of fun. On the Ball for the Super Nintendo is a game that took me a while to finally play, and when I did, I couldn't put it down. Now, I've seen the game, I saw it for rent, I've heard other people talk about it. I'm like, yeah, but you're just dropping a marble through this Mode 7 maze. And if you're into that bonus stage of the first Sonic the Hedgehog, maybe you'll really like this game. Maybe. But no, you don't even control the marble, you control the stage. The area. You just, with the L and R buttons, left and right, just, rotating it left, rotating it right. Very speed runnable. I remember seeing this game on, at the rental store. And I was like, okay, I get it. Just by looking at the picture, because we didn't have, videos back then, I get it. But I was like, okay, yeah, that looks dumb. And then when I finally got around to playing it, I was like, oh, you know what, here it is, I'll play it. I was like, wow, this game is dumb. And then an hour and a half later, when I found myself, I was still playing it, I was like, well, it can't be that dumb. I'm still playing it. And I still feel that way with this game. On the Ball for the Super Nintendo. Don't judge a book by its cover, or don't judge a marble by its Mode 7. I don't know. It's fun. Trust me. I changed my mind. I changed my opinion. This game's awesome. Let's check out an awesome recommendation from my buddy Jay from the Square Pegs channel.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jay here from Square Pegs, and John asked me if I could talk about a game on the PlayStation 2, and I do love the PS2. I actually just did PS2 month back on my channel in September, and I want to tell you about one of my favorite arcade racing games on the console, and that is Sledstorm. That's right, Sledstorm from EA Sports Big. A fantastic, over-the-top snowmobile racing game, so not something you've ever really seen before. I love it. The action is over the top. The design of the game is fantastic. The levels are great. It's got such an awesome signature EA Sports Big sense of style that I can't help but love it. If you haven't played it, it's worth it, and it's dirt cheap. It's a fantastic game. John, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Now, back to you.
I am not kidding when I say this. I've never heard of that game, and it looks awesome. So, that's a game. See, I'm even learning on my own channel. I've never even heard of that game, and it looks completely amazing. I'm looking forward to checking that game out myself. Here's one of my favorites for the NES. It's Rescue the Embassy Mission. Love this game. So many different gameplay values in this game, and each level takes You know, just like a few minutes. Just a few minutes. You can pick it up and just start going. So you have to rescue the hostages in a matter of a few different styles of gameplay. The first thing you need to do is have your snipers get to their base, get to their area, get to their lookout, whatever that's called. And you do that by, kind of ducking inside doors, jumping in bushes, avoiding these spotlights. If the spotlights get you, they're going to start shooting at you. So you have to either duck and roll or, avoid the bullets if you can. Once you get to where you're going, then it's the next guy's turn. If you happen to get shot along the way, well, the game's still not over. You won't get the best score, but you can still keep playing. But this is just like just an extra thing you can do here. That's how the game starts. Then when you're on the rooftops, you have your ability to either jump in the building or use the person who got to the lookout point. Remember those snipers at the very beginning? So now you can kind of look through the windows, maybe find some extra enemies here, the terrorists. And if you happen to see one in a window, it's either silhouette anyway, you can eliminate him. And that's one less enemy you have to kill when you are inside the building. Very, very cool. Next gameplay style, this one's super quick. You just have to rappel from this thing. You can't just go all the way down because you'll slip through, but just little by little, bit by bit, crash through the window, and then it turns into this style of gameplay. Little maze looking, shoot the enemies before they get you. You can see your map down in the corner. That'll tell you where the enemies are. Or in the more difficult areas, it won't. You just have to, trust that you'll find them. Find the hostages just simply by looking at them. You're basically rescuing them, but just don't shoot them. That's all. Don't do that. 3 levels in these buildings. You got to find all the enemies, find all the hostages, eliminate all the enemies, and then it's game over, and that's it. And then you get judged, or you get scored on how well you do. Now, this gameplay took me about 2 minutes and 34 seconds. It's exactly 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Can you do it faster? I mean, can you do it more precise where you don't, get hit by the other enemies and stuff like that? You can keep playing and playing. Rescue the NBC mission. Love this game. Still play it today. Here's a unique one for the Sega Master System. This is Fantasy Zone The Maze. Now, Fantasy Zone, classic Sega. Fantasy Zone itself was available on the Master System. It was on the NES through Tengen. It's been on other platforms too, and even like the newer ones where they would have like the arcade classics, or what is that called? The Sega Ages collections and stuff like that. But this is Fantasy Zone The Maze. It plays a little bit like Pac-Man, believe it or not. So, taking it all the way back to the old school. It's a Fantasy Zone themed game, but completely different. It'd be like if they made like a Gradius maze game. Or maybe that's not the best example, but it works. It works for Fantasy Zone because Fantasy Zone is this kind of, it's Fantasy Zone. Bright, vivid colors, great soundtrack. Fantasy Zone The Maze. Very interesting to see, but certainly unique for the Sega Master System. Might be worth looking into. Quirk is an all-time favorite puzzle game of mine. It was one of the first Game Boy games I got when I got my Game Boy back in 1989. And just a fun, simple style puzzle game. Really, you just have to move through the turnstiles and go from one side and go through the stairs to go on to the next stage. There's turnstiles, there's boxes you can push, stuff gets in the way all the time. These are the easy early stages, of course. There are other blocks you can push into these holes that will make it so you can create a path or a bridge to get to where you need to go through these doors. Some stages might have 2 characters that you can kind of swap between, so you have to, go tandem and, try to go through there too. A lot of variety, a lot of gameplay, a lot of the, it starts out easy and you're just like, well, this is impossible. How do I get past this part? Well, there's a little bit of that in this game too, but Quirk, definitely a quirky game, if you will. And this was also the first game I ever played tandem, like with the link cable. My brother's friend also had a Game Boy with Quirk. And it was like, oh, this is cool. This is the future. We can, I'm looking at my own screen, you're looking at your own screen, and it's like a race to the finish line kind of thing. Yeah, super fun. Let's throw in a game for the PlayStation 1. Why not? That's retro enough, right? Silhouette Mirage, one of my absolute favorite PlayStation 1 games. It was a later release game compared to when the PlayStation 1 came out, but man, I love this game. It's one of the games I still just, dream about. Love the character, too. The game is from Treasure, too, so you're getting bright, vivid colors, interesting gameplay, fun mechanics, great animation, and the gimmick behind this one is you're kind of split in half. To simplify it, there's a red side and a blue side. Now, if your enemies are also red and you're on the red side, you can shoot them, but you won't kill them. You'll just remove their, their soul, their spirit, something like that. Basically, and if they lose enough of that, then they can't shoot back at you. They don't have enough spirit, I guess. There's a word for it. However, if you flip to your blue side and the enemy is red, for instance, then you can actually take damage from them. And it works the other way too. Like, it works like, versus you as well. So that's where the gameplay comes in. So it's not just a run and gun, which, I mean, yes, it totally is a run and gun, but you have to use that element to your advantage as well. So, I mean, maybe the enemy is tough because they keep killing you by shooting at you. Well, maybe you do want to remove their spirit first, and that way you can just have the upper hand on, taking care of business here. Just absolutely love this game. The game's called Silhouette Mirage. This game is the game that taught me how to spell silhouette, which I've had to spell so many times in the past because I use a silhouette portrait when it comes to cutting my my NES labels and stuff. The game is called Sidearms, and don't you remember, man, I loved it when arcade games looked like this. This is some early Capcom in the arcade. A side-scrolling horizontal shooter. The gimmick is you have two buttons, one shoots to the left and one shoots to the right. So if you have someone coming up from behind you, well, you can attack them too. Lots of enemies, lots of options for upgrades and power-ups and things of that nature. I was a big fan of Sidearms in the arcade. I was hoping to find it on the NES. It never came out for the NES, but it did come out for the TurboGrafx 16, and I'm glad it did, because this TurboGrafx 16 version of Sidearms, to me, may as well have been a one-to-one port of the arcade version. I'm sure it's not, but this looks as good as the arcade game as I would ever think. And while we're talking TurboGrafx 16, we can also cover one of the TurboGrafx 16 CD games. If you have the CD or the Turbo Duo, check out the Addams Family. This game is kooky and altogether ooky, but not in the way that you would think. This Addams Family game for the Turbo CD, you play as Tully, the accountant, the money guy from the movie. Out of all the characters you could have played as in the Addams Family, you play as the accountant with his umbrella that shoots sparks. Who wrote this? Well, because it's also a CD game, there's actual voice in it too. Not from the actors of the movie, but just some random people doing the voices of these characters too. This game may be more nostalgic for me than anything, but I still come back to this game every once in a while just to look, just to see. So maybe there's something in it that I'm looking beyond or past or something, I'm not sure. And this one, maybe it's one of the better ones compared to the other ones, I don't know.
Hey there folks, John here from Biddy Kong's Quest, and when John asked me to recommend literally any game, it was honestly pretty easy for me to make my pick, and that is Little Nemo, the Dream Master. I'm always really surprised at how few people are actually aware of this game, or at least have actually played it if they have heard of it. If you don't know what it is, this is a platformer by Capcom, who, on the NES was known for their Disney platformers like DuckTales and Chip and Dale, and then, of course, Mega Man, and a bunch of other ones like Bionic Commando, tons of classics, but for some reason, this game gets left off of many people's lists when it comes to like the best platformers on the NES, and I think that's just criminal because this is absolutely one of my favorite games of all time. Like, it's probably in my top 10. Now, part of that is because I'm a big fan of Little Nemo in general, the movie, the comic, all this stuff that goes with it, but I still think this is one of the best platformers on the NES, simply because it's not just about getting to the end of the level. There's a whole element of having to collect keys as you go throughout each stage, where you can actually get to the end of the level and technically beat the level, but if you don't have all the keys, you can't progress to the next stage. And so there's a little bit of a puzzle element to it as well. And then you can also turn into a bunch of animals, and they give you different traversal powers as well. So it's actually a really deep game for the NES, and absolutely one of my favorites. If you've never played it, you can probably pick it up for $10 if you get a good deal. $15 is probably market value for it, and it is worth every penny. So that's my recommendation, and I have no hesitation in making it. So there you go.
High Seas Havoc for the Sega Genesis. Let's talk about it. Well, the beautiful thing is when Sonic the Hedgehog came out for the Genesis, we had a few Sonic the Hedgehog type games for the Sega Genesis, and I'm all for it. And this is, well, admittedly one of those style of games, but it's still pretty cool on its own and in and of itself. Fun game, fun platformer, moves pretty fast, you have your jump, and the other jump kind of has a little kick to it too, but still you can bop on the enemies' heads and that's what'll eliminate them and all that. Has kind of the pirate theme going on, so that's always kind of cool too. High Seas Havoc is just one of those games that, if you have a Sega Genesis, might be worth checking out for you. And although, of course, the videos are free on YouTube, you can support the channel by purchasing some stuff I have in my Shopify store, like these arcade-scented air fresheners that smell like menthols, wood paneling, a gumball machine, and spilt cola. You can also help support by hitting subscribe. I'm trying to get to 200,000 by the end of the year. Thank you so much. Kakoma Night in Busyland for the Super Nintendo. Looks cartoony, looks neat, has some whatever storyline, doesn't matter. The game plays like kicks. When you draw the area, it fills it in, and then when you get so much percentage of the playing field, that's when you can move on to the next stage. But unlike Kicks, it doesn't just fill in on the opposite end of where like the major enemies are, if that makes sense, because sometimes you could like block in an enemy and it would just like clear everything all at once. This one doesn't quite work that way. It works that way to eliminate some enemies and stuff like that, sure, but it still does its own thing. It has a little anime vibe to it too. Gotta love that. This is for the Super Nintendo Kakoma Night. Well, the Atari 2600 Plus came out. A lot of people are looking out for those classic Atari games that are actually worth playing. And Frostbite comes very high on my list of games that are totally worth checking out. Simple enough, you have to build the igloo by jumping on these ice things. There are 4 levels, 4 layers, I suppose, of these blocks of ice, little icebergs. And when you pop on them, then it creates another brick in your igloo. When you have it all filled in, you jump in there, move on to the next stage. With your button, if you're standing on one of the things, you have an enemy coming or an obstacle on the way, you can hit the button and it'll reverse direction. That may just save you. Later levels start to speed up pretty quickly. There might be the introduction of a polar bear. Frostbite for the Atari 2600, it's a favorite of mine.
What's up everyone, Game Dad here. Now, a game that I personally love on the N64 is Diddy Kong Racing. This game, in my opinion, is far superior to Mario Kart 64 in basically every way. Instead of just karts, you actually get hovercraft, you get airplanes, you get karts to race in, of course, but you also get an actual story that you can play along with, and you get a bunch of different worlds and stuff, and it makes it more cohesive in your gameplay, and honestly, it's just a ton of fun. There's multiple characters that you can play the game with, and you can just have a blast going through a bunch of different worlds. So that would be my pick. If you were to choose any one game to play on the N64, it would be Diddy Kong Racing.
Taking it all the way back to the classic Game Boy here, this is the DMG, and Cosmo Tank is a game you've got to check out. Love me some Cosmo Tank. Well, it's from Atlas, so you know it's going to be pretty decent in the first place. Top-down overview, that's how it starts. And you're moving around, ton of enemies on screen. You gotta, just shoot them best you can. 8 directions to shoot these things. You can go inside these little, like, pit stop type areas to get intel on what's coming up or what's to come or things like that. Go inside these little tunnels and stuff like that, and that's when it turns into a first-person style game, where you're going down the hallways, and if an enemy comes up, well, then you're shooting the enemy here. You can rotate left and right, and your turret can kind of go up and down too. Even has boss battles to an extent. Cosmic Tank, for the classic Game Boy, has so much going on for itself. Imagine if this game came out for the NES, a lot of people would be talking about it. Unfortunately, it kind of slips through the cracks on, so many games that came out during the Game Boy's time. That's why we're talking about it now. Now, when we're talking Game Boy Color, you know what? I want to mention Dragon Warrior 1 and 2. That's right, an RPG on this one. Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, both on the same cartridge. I want to talk about it because, not just because, Dragon Warrior, it's a classic game in Nintendo. A lot of people do this game as the game that Nintendo Power give away for free with subscriptions to get the American audience used to turn-based style RPGs. But this one has a little opening cinematic. Other than that, the graphics look a little better. The color's a little bit more vibrant. But to me, the selling point for Dragon Warrior 1 and 2 is it doesn't have the tedious grinding that Dragon Warrior 1 had. I remember playing Dragon Warrior 1, like way back in the day when it first came out, and so much time. You want to go to the next place, but you can't because you're not strong enough. So you just have to like sit there and spend hours just walking around killing enemies and going to the inn and getting your stuff back up and stuff like that. This one doesn't have that. Kind of like how more modern day RPGs, you can do that if you want, but you don't have to. You can basically just kind of go from place to place to place to place. And if you play your cards right and you defeat the enemies along the way too, you should be okay. That's what I loved about this. So especially if you're really into the Dragon Quest series now and you want to see where it came from, Dragon Warrior 1 is a pretty rough start on the NES. You might just start with this one. And while we're talking Game Boy, let's also talk about Turbo Turtle Adventure. I have to make sure I get that right. Turbo Turtle Adventure. Well, it's an overhead maze puzzle game where you play as a turtle shell. It could have been a ball, it could have been Kirby. Doesn't matter, but you play the role of a turtle shell, gotta collect the keys, and then go through the doors and move on to the next stage. And then along the way you pick up items and stuff like that. Some of these items can cause you to jump, so which will definitely help you out. Some of the items can make an extra square of the bridge, so you don't just fall down all the time. Turbo Turtle Adventure for the Game Boy Advance. It's unique, it's interesting, it's fun enough, and it might be worth checking out for yourself. With the Analog Duo available now, let's talk about Paracel Stars for the TurboGrafx 16. This is the story of Bubble Bobble 3. If you figure Rainbow Islands is Bubble Bobble 2, then I guess Paracel Stars is Bubble Bobble 3. Came out on the NES in PAL regions. We never got it in the United States, but the TurboGrafx 16 version was the version I had back when I was playing my TurboGrafx 16 back in the early 90s. And if you like Bubble Bobble, it plays a lot like those Bubble Bobble style games. This plays more like Bubble Bobble than Rainbow Islands did. You got your parasol, that's your umbrella, and that's how you could either like thwack enemies and then pick them up and throw them. You can also use your parasol to float down platforms as needed. You can even collect water to use as a weapon as well, and other things later on too. But what a great game. What a super colorful game. I like how the enemies in this one are musical instruments. Like in Bubble Bobble, they're all like wind-up toys and stuff. And this one, well, they're all kind of like wind-up musical instruments in a way, with the trumpets and the castanets and... Castanetas? Is that what they're called? Yeah, you know. If you love Bubble Bobble, you're going to love Parasol Stars on the TurboGrafx 16. And with the new Atari 2600 Plus that plays physical cartridges, maybe you're looking for new Atari games to play. Well, Journey Escape, that's right, they made a video game based on the band Journey. They had one in the arcade. This one plays nothing like the arcade version. This is its own version. You have to get your 5 members of the band to the concert on time, basically, by jumping in this ship that you see at the beginning of the game. But blocking your path along the way are these rabid fans. Those are the hearts. These shifty-eyed promoters. Those were always my favorite guys. they steal your money, too, while you're at it. You got barricades, you got the paparazzi, those are the flashing light bulbs, you know, the flashing bulbs there. And you have to like make your way to the top of the screen. And when you go up there, that's when you're running, that's when things move faster, but as things get in your way, it pushes you back down the screen. So you just gotta do what you can to maneuver and dodge around them and everything. Every once in a while you'll find like this alien thing that will make you invincible for a little while. And eventually you will find your ship, usually at the last few seconds of any stage. And then when you find your ship, you crash into it, not crash into it, but you know, you get to it, you touch it. And then it moves on to the next character, the next band member. And then as the stages progress, the sporadic movements of the enemies get worse and worse. So every once in a while you'll find like this Kool-Aid guy looking thing too, and that will give you invincibility until the end of the stage. So the little blue alien guys for a couple seconds, the other thing all the way to the end. And if you miss your ship, you lost the game. It does not come back. Journey Escape for the Atari 2600. I played an ungodly amount of this game when I was growing up. I still enjoy playing it today. For the PlayStation 1, we gotta talk about Bust a Groove. Now, I'm actually showing you the Japanese version of this game right now, but both games are the same. Essentially. There might be like a different translation of a name. It doesn't matter. They couldn't call it Bust a Move in America because our Puzzle Bobble was called Bust a Move. So call it Bust a Groove. It actually might make a little bit more sense. And it is a dance rhythm battle game. During this time, there are so many rhythm games, and I love rhythm games. You know, Dance Dance Revolution, Parappa the Rapper, the list goes on and on and on and on. This one was cool because it had cool music, had easy button presses, and really what you see here is, now I'm playing as the dude on the left here. I'm not doing the best, but bear with me. So it tells you what buttons to push, and then you have to hit the X or the circle, depending on, you know, which line you're looking at, on the beat, on the fourth, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the 4, that's when you hit the button. And the other buttons ahead with like the arrows, whatever direction the arrows are pointing, you can push those at any point, whatever's best for you. You can tap those out of the way as long as you hit that button on the beat, on the drop, on the 4th beat per measure, then it signifies. And you just keep going and going and going. You'll do a nice combo. That's how you play the game. I can't tell you how addicted to this game I am. When it first came out, when I first played it, oh boy, I played it all the time. It's just fun. You can also do these things where you can attack them as well. You have both, your other buttons, instead of like X and circle, your square and triangle are both attack them. If you hit that button on the downbeat, then you'll attack them, or if you hit the button, you will dodge theirs. And they'll telegraph theirs, but you got 4 beats to do it, because they'll signify it, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and on that 4th you have to hit your button, or you lost your combo, and you're phased for a little bit. Not a fun look. I would love it if they brought this back. I know rhythm games aren't in style anymore, but Bust a Move, or Bust a Groove rather, here in the United States. And there was a second one as well. I'm more nostalgic for the first one, but yeah, it was super fun. Not the kind of game you can play on an emulator. I am playing this on a Mister and doing okay. But for the most part, you need that lagless proof to play this game. So, you know, definitely play it on an actual CD, on an actual PlayStation 1. It's the only way to play this game, really.
Hey everyone. When John asked me to recommend a game, I was a little nervous, nauseous, because, well, it's John Riggs. I've been a fan first, and now it's crazy that I get to be in one of his videos. But after that subsided, I got my wits about me. I immediately thought of Elebits for Nintendo Wii. This is an underrated gem, in my opinion. Came out in 2006, and I was able to get it in 2007, my first duty station in Okinawa. And it got me through a lot of nights. It's a really fun game where the Wii controls actually probably the best in any of the Wii games I've used, where it actually worked really well. And you aim and you capture these Elebits, and when you capture them, you use them to restore power back into the room. And the more power you restore in the room, the further you advance, and you get a grade system, so the better you do in the room, the better the grade. You need at least a C grade, though, to pass each level. And again, a really fun game. It's really affordable. And if you can pick it up and you have a Wii and you're a fan of the Wii, then by all means, I highly recommend this one. Thank you for watching, and John, geez, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Excalibur 2097 is the name of this game for the Super Nintendo. That's right, we got a Super Nintendo game on this list today, as we often do. I do love my Super Nintendo, and Excalibur 2097, it just blends in with all the other science fiction-y, let's put a bunch of X's and Z's in games' names to make them sound cooler than they are. But I'm here to tell you this game's already cool enough. You didn't have to call it Excalibur. It didn't have to be called any of that. It's a fun game, and I like the fact that you have different slashes too. You have a slash, you have a thrust, you have another kind of like a swing that makes the projectile happen too. Graphics are pretty cool, the music's pretty cool, it's just a pretty cool game, and I think it's worth checking out. I mean, yes, there are a lot of games just like this, but this one specifically, Excalibur 2097, I think I remember, it was one of those games I rented once, and I was like, it's kind of cool, but didn't really think too much of it until later on when I started like buying Super Nintendo games like later in life, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this game, and I actually show more of an appreciation for it now than I did then. I'm sure back then I was playing something else and it was a good rental at the time, but you know, there's nothing wrong with games like this. I do like games like this quite a bit, so happy to see this and just wanted to share it with you. And just in case you happen to find it at a convention, you see it pop up with everything else, and you're just like, whatever. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Check it out. I got my different homebrews available right now for sale. My book about breakfast cereal of the 80s and 90s. My different unique air fresheners like this one that smells like a 1980s arcade complete with menthol cigarettes, wood paneling, spilt cola, and a rusty gumball machine. You can grab any of these right now in my link in the description below. Hey, let's talk about the Sega Genesis and Insector X. If the game says Sage's Creations on the title screen, you know it's going to be a pretty decent game. That's my Genesis rule of thumb there. It's a side-scrolling shooter. I mean, honestly, there's not a whole lot going on with this game that you can't find in a lot of other games, but I liked the difference of you weren't in outer space. It wasn't World War II. It was just, I don't know, you play as this kind of a mechanical bug, at least in this version, and then the enemies are also bugs, you know, that are bugging you. That's right, they're flying around and flying and getting your way as Insector X. Music's pretty cool. I remember I liked the music to this game quite a bit. It's just another side-scrolling shooter. You've played a bunch of them. Sega Genesis is a great console for shooters, and this is just another one to add to the list of games you should check out. Insector X. Make it happen. I want to talk about Kim Possible 2, Draken's Demise. This has nothing to do with the Super Nintendo Draken game, right? And especially at conventions and sometimes at video game stores, these Disney Game Boy Advance games are a dime a dozen. There's so many of them out there, it's hard to keep track. I'm here to tell you, the Kim Possible games are amazing. And this one specifically, the second one, I think is probably the best. I like the first one a lot too, but this one is just great. It's an action game. It's a side-scrolling action. You run around and you beat up the bad guys and all that. You have some side items as well, so you can, you have a grappling hook that you can use. That's totally cool. Nice, huge levels to kind of, have you explore a little bit more, so it's not like super linear. Not that it's what was it called? It's not like a Metroidvania or anything like that, but a game like Kim Possible doesn't need to be like a Metroidvania. They just have giant level that you have to kind of like, backtrack a little bit, maybe climb up and go over here, then do this other thing, and oh man, I love this game. It's such a fun game, and you would never think it. It took me years to realize this, because I was like, Kim Possible? Not that Disney show that plays at 3, I never actually watched it. I remember when it came on, and I was like, okay, so then of course I'll just change the channel or whatever. But when Kim Possible came around, man, it's when the games came around, I saw them and I was just like, okay, I'm sure it's fine. But then I had a couple of friends recommend it to me. It's like, hey, believe it or not, these Kim Possible games are pretty neat. Now there you go, Kim Possible. And you can use your lipstick to create this weird trampoline thing. That's, interesting.
I'm a big Vampire Survivor fan, and there's a great indie game on the Steam Deck, and that's Halls of Torment. And it plays like Vampire Survivors, but has the look of the original Diablo. This is a fantastic $5 game, and if you're a fan of Vampire Survivors, you have that quick twitch gaming, characters unlock, power-ups, a story. You know what? There's a lot to enjoy here, and you know what? These are the types of games that I like to support. These $5 titles that many people may not know about. It is overwhelmingly positive reviews on the Steam Deck, and I highly recommend it. It's only $5. Check it out.
Taking it all the way back with the Game Boy Classic, and this game is called Tumble Pop. This is the second game on this list that's a little like Bubble Bobble, but there's nothing wrong with that, because Bubble Bobble pretty much rules. Tumble Pop has these kind of larger levels, a couple screens worth that you can side-scroll left and right, but with your vacuum, it's almost like, you know, it's like a Ghostbusters type thing, right? You got your vacuum, you can suck up the enemies and then shoot them back out to defeat the other enemies. That's basically the it of it. And while you do that too, you can collect the letters that might spell out Tumble Pop. Fun game to check out. May as well check it out. Tumble Pop for the Game Boy Classic. It's a good one, it's a fun one. It's one that you can play for sure. Yeah, we can talk about NES. Remote control. You know, recently for no reason, I've been kind of playing more and more of the game show type console games, of which there are several. You got Family Feud, Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, and I always come back to remote control. Remote control, from what I remember, outside of like MTV News, was the first non-music video show on MTV. I'm probably wrong, but it was one of the times where it's like, hey, I'm okay with them not playing music videos for a bit because this is kind of cool. Now, I mean, they don't even really do music videos much on MTV anymore. I'm also not the demographic, so I can't complain about it. Here's what this game show is. Super great game show. I wish you'd come back today. So you have your TV, and the idea is there's so many channels. There's 9 channels you can choose from. You don't know the topic on any of the channels until you select it. And then you know what it is. And then after you guess the question, you can move to a different channel, or you can select one more question from that same category, only now you know what that category is. So if, you know, maybe you're the only one on the panel of 3 of the other contestants, maybe you're the only one who knows, let's say, Gilligan's Island. Well, then you might think about that and go back to it so you can get the points on, you know, for yourself, when it's your turn to choose. You also have to remember that this game came out in the late 80s, so the questions are all based on television of the time and the reruns of the time. So a lot of questions about Gilligan's Island, Brady Bunch, Hawaii Five-0, stuff like that. Yeah, Rocky and Bullwinkle's timeless, but you know. Remote control for the NES. Check it out. I love it. If you're looking for something on Sega Dreamcast, look no further than Power Stone. Power Stone had that very cool Capcom vibe from that late 90s, early 2000s that I miss. I miss Capcom games like this. Well, Capcom, one of the premier fighting companies for sure, and what made Power Stone different was it was less of a 3D fighter and more of a kind of 3D room environment fighter. Like, yes, it was still a fighting game, but you were in these rooms that would have these items, or, I mean, it had the Power Stones too, which would, I mean, of course, that's the name of the game here. But it was fun that just to have, like, this giant environmental room where you're not always facing each other. You can, like, run around and grab the things you need and, you know, use that to your advantage to take out these other enemies here. Yeah, whoever you happen to be fighting against anyway. Fun single player, better as a 2-player, even better as a 4-player. Power Stone, definitely the one you wanted to check out. Such a huge party game, because you have like Mario Party, which is a fun, polite game, and then you have this game, which was the opposite. But at least you're not stealing each other's stars, so this one definitely wins in that book. Power Stone for the Sega Dreamcast. You gotta check it out. I am an insane Super Monkey Ball fan, and Super Monkey Ball Jr. for the Game Boy Advance, believe it or not, plays super, super well. I always kind of envision a Game Boy Advance being basically like a portable Super Nintendo with what it could do. And I think we could have seen a pretty decent version of Monkey Ball on the Super Nintendo. I mean, it was still during like the Nintendo versus Sega console wars and all that. But this game runs smoother than I would have given it credit for. It runs better than I would have thought just by looking at the photos. I saw the photos. I saw the things when this game first came out. I was like, you know what? It's probably going to be pretty good. I don't know. I'll check it out. It might be a little whatever, but it's smooth, really smooth for a Game Boy Advance. And for everything that's going on, if you love the Monkey Ball games, it actually plays pretty decently as a Game Boy Advance title. I've never been good at these. I mean, much better. Again, you have the D-pad. Now, if you had like the analog, like I mostly played this on GameCube, so I'm mostly used to that. So this one has a lot of like tapping that you have to do to align yourself. You be prepared to fall off a lot. But in any of the Monkey Ball games, be prepared to fall off a lot. Super Monkey Ball Jr., it's on the Game Boy Advance, and if you're like, I like Game Boy Advance, or I like, Super Monkey Ball, but I don't know about it for the Game Boy Advance. No, it's worth checking out.
Hi everyone, my name is Ash Said Hi, and I am here to talk to you today about Super Nintendo games. Bassin's Black Bass. You heard that right, a fishing game. When John reached out to me and asked me, hey Ash, I knew that this was going to be the one that I talked about because it is truly relaxing to play and super duper fun. So I feel like games that are cozy have great music, great story, some kind of storyline, and they're not too difficult to play. And I feel like this game has all of that. You can customize your character. There's a bit of a storyline. The music is very upbeat, chill, relaxing. And when you're fishing, the water sound effects are so good. They're realistic, and it makes you feel like you're listening to like a river. It's super chill, someplace that you want to go to relax. I also love that the game doesn't have a high learning curve. Like, of course, there are some fish you have to figure out what fish respond to what lures and things like that, or what the right fishing spots are. But once you play the game for 30 minutes, an hour, you kind of get the hang of it. So it's not too difficult. And I feel like this is a game I could brew a cup of tea, get a blanket, pop this into the Super Nintendo, and play for a few hours and feel totally relaxed by the end of that. I hope you all enjoyed hearing about my Super Nintendo choice, Bassin's Black Bass. And if you've never played it before, definitely check it out and let me know what you think.
Got a racing game for the NES, Formula 1 Built to Win. F1 BTW, why would I be talking about a racing game when I could talk about any other game on the NES? You can get your upgrades, you got the parts shop, you can check out your car, you can get different cars along the way too, and you gotta raise money to afford all of these things too. You also have to pay money to be in these races. Fortunately, the first one's free and the other ones are pretty cheap too. But then from there as a racing game, well, it's a nice racing game. Like a Rad Racer or something, Plays like a totally decent NES racing game. Even has the thing where if you hold up, you can have your little boost thing that makes you go faster. Once you win, you get your cash, you can buy your upgrades. It's always kind of fun to see what kind of upgrades you can do. And then when you're ready, you're off to another race. So as far as racing games go for the NES, this one's probably my favorite, and love to see it. You wouldn't know this by looking at the box, you wouldn't know this by looking at the label if you saw it at a convention, but it's a super fun game. Formula 1 Built to Win. Yeah, it's great. Dead Angle for the Sega Master System. Now in the arcade, we had a place called Red Robin. Maybe you've heard of it. In fact, Yakima was the first ever franchised Red Robin outside of Seattle, which was a little bit of a Yakima history there. In the back room, there's a little mini arcade there. One of the games there was Empire City 1931. Loved me some Empire City 1931. And Dead Angle is the home console version, basically. I'm sure it's from the same company or something, because it's totally similar style here. I liked it because you're looking through, like the outline character, looking through them, so you could see them if they're on the other side of you. And it's really, you just kind of have to aim at these guys and shoot them a bunch. What else could you do in a game like this? Depending on where you move your cursor, that's the direction you move. So it's like the camera's not moving for you, you're moving it around depending on where you're putting your target here. Up the windows, down the windows, in the door frames and all that. Yeah. You'll get shot a lot. Sometimes the enemies drop like items, like health, or like a better gun, something like that. But Dead Angle for the Sega Master System. Love this one. Wish we had this. If this game would have come out for the NES, I would have loved it. I mean, we had Go-Go 13, which had this kind of view, but yeah, this is just great.
One of my favorite consoles of all time is the Atari 2600, and if you got one of the new Atari 2600 Plus consoles, and you're looking to get a fun retro fix, look no further than Solar Storm. It's a fast-paced paddle game from Imagic. You're a spaceship charged with defending your planet from the onslaught of the Deltoids. Sounds like something you should be working on at the gym. I digress. As you fight off waves of the Deltoid ships and space garbage from crashing into your planet, you must keep an eye on the planet temperature. If the temperature reaches critical level, the game is over. But wait! There's more. There is a zoomed out planetary bonus level where you shoot down more Deltoids for extra points. This game is actually one of the most challenging games I've ever encountered on the Atari 2600, and for a whole $12, you too can work out your Deltoids while shooting the Deltoids on your Atari 2600 Plus. John, thanks for having me on, and we'll see you soon.
You ever check out Mystical Fighter for the Sega Genesis or Sega Mega Drive? Mystical Fighter? Well, how about another game where you play as a kabuki? Now, this is kind of in the realm of like, why not be a kabuki, I suppose. It is a side-scrolling brawler. It's a beat 'em up. It's a beat 'em up. But you're a kabuki. 2 players simultaneous. You would both be kabukis if you're both playing at the same time. And it's just a decent beat 'em up. It's a decent brawler. I like games like this for systems like this, because when systems like this come out, everyone always talks about, you know, Streets of Rage 2. Those are the best. They're the best. They're absolutely the best. But you can only play those so long where you're like, I want more of that, but maybe something a little bit different. And so for the Sega Genesis, there's a few beat 'em ups. But Mystical Fighter, man, you can't go wrong. You don't have a whole lot of moves in this game. You got your punch and your kick and stuff like that. You can kind of run and dash and do a little sliding kick too. I always loved the grapple moves. And the grapple moves on this game are just insane, because it's like you just swing them around, get them a big old giant swing. You can also, like, you know, just kind of body slam them over your head too. Cool, different fun areas to see. Something that you would see like as, well, being a kabuki, I suppose, as far as the backdrops go. Boss battles, as always, you got to have the boss battles in your brawling games, your beat 'em up games. Always easier as a 2-player. Again, as a 1-player, it's doable, but it's a little rough anyway. And instead of having like the desperation move, you more have like the shinobi, you know, attack the enemies on the screen type things that you can use. A little bit like Golden Axe, a little bit closer to Golden Axe, where you can, like, you know, collect these things, and the more you have, the better off you're going to be and everything too. Mystical Fighter for the Sega Genesis, check it out. Bill and Ted's Excellent Game Boy Adventure for the Game Boy Classic. Now, hold on. I know what you're thinking. Bill and Ted for the NES was just about the worst game ever. And I'm here to say you're not wrong. I'm not arguing that. But the one for the Game Boy, it's different. Completely different. The one for the NES, more based on the movie. This one more based on the cartoon series. And it plays completely different. In fact, it plays a little bit more... Why am I reminded of Jumpman Jr. when I see something like this? You just have to move in these single screen... It's single screen arcade style. You have to pick up those orbs. And watch out for the enemies. The enemies in this game are, you know, the celebrity figures that maybe you saw in, like, the movie, for instance. So you have these, like Abraham Lincoln type characters, at least in the first stage. Get all the orbs, it'll open up the, you know, the exit. You move on to the next stage here. I love Napoleon's hat. Napoleon uses his hat like a boomerang. That's the best. And it's just this stage after stage after stage. Different stages might have different things like conveyor belts, or these platforms that slowly dissipate the longer you stand on them and stuff like that. You can actually use that to your advantage too, because you can make that and maybe you know, trap an enemy on the other side. The enemy being Einstein, apparently. Now that I think about it, why didn't they have Einstein in the movie? That would have been great. Anyway, yeah, for some reason, Bill and Ted's on the Game Boy, I thought it was actually pretty good. It's at least worth checking out, right?
Hey, it's your Games Consoles here. I want to thank John for allowing me to be on the channel here. My pick for a retro game is going to be for a platform that recently became retro, which is the Xbox 360. My recommended game on 360 is Driver San Francisco, an amazing game in the Driver series that doesn't get a whole lot of love. So in the game you play as Tanner, the original series. He gets into a coma and has an out-of-body experience, and the way you avenge what happened is you have an out-of-body experience where you go from driver to driver. So you can hop out of, you can hop into any car you see on the map, which is really kind of cool. So you go from car to car, trying to take out your pursuers using other cars. It's a really unique game, a game that kind of had a breakaway from, I guess it kind of expanded on Driver 2 a bit, on Driver 3, where you can get out of your car and go into other cars, but it handled it differently, and rather in a unique way. But you can pick this game up physically on the 360 or PS3, and that's one way to play it. I think there's also a PC DVD version as well. But it is backwards compatible on the Series X, Xbox One. So if you want to pick it up, you got to pick it up on one of those platforms physically. And I definitely would recommend it. It's a great game and a wonderful addition to the Driver series.
Chu Man Fu. This is for the TurboGrafx 16. Now, first of all, I love the name. We've always kind of referred to that kind of long Chinese mustache that you might see in like Hong Kong action cinema from like the old masters, you know, the one that kind of like, you know, dingles down, like, you know, across the mustache, then down Hulk Hogan style, then kind of dingles off the chin. We've always kind of referred to that as a Fu Manchu style mustache, and now here's Chu Man Fu. It's a puzzle game. It's an interesting style of puzzle game too. Nice because when you see games like this, you have to put the thing on the thing. Okay, well, we've seen this style of game before as far as puzzle games go. You have these giant balls that you got to roll around. You can actually kick them too and use them as a weapon, which is fantastic. What's nice about this versus the other games like this is not only can you pull them backwards, but you can also roll them around corners. Now, you can't roll it around you if you're in like a narrow hallway, so you have to like kind of back up and pivot and put it somewhere else. But for TurboGrafx-16 games in the United States of America, and I am a huge, huge, huge TurboGrafx-16 fan, but admittedly and honestly, man, there's a lot out there that's not really worth playing. I mean, maybe worth looking at for a second, and then there's a bunch of games that I really, really, really like. Like, really, really, really like them. This one's one of those, and I love it. I love it. I didn't have it when I was growing up, but I remember seeing it in magazines, and then later in life I was able to grab it. And man, I wish I would have grabbed it back in the day. I think I would have played this a lot more too. Chu Man Fu for the TurboGrafx-16 might be one worth looking out for. If you already played Bonk, you already know about all the other ones too. Yeah, check that one out. From the moment you pop it in and it plays that hype reel, you know you're going to be in for a treat. Now, this game is called Bust a Groove here in the United States. Bust a Groove in the US. If it looks a little different or something like that, I'm actually playing Bust a Move. That's the Japanese version. They couldn't call it that in the US because the US Bust a Move is Puzzle Bobble in Japan. Never mind about all that. If you're looking for it in the US, look out for Bust a Groove. Okay, there is 1 and 2. I'm just going to showcase the first one in this video. This is a rhythm game. This game came out during the height of the rhythm game invasion, which I was all for. You choose your player, and you have to press your button on the beat, whether it be the circle button or sometimes the X button. It'll be one of those two, the circle button or the X button, but before that you'll see a sequence, a combination there. You do not have to push those arrows in rhythm, but you do have to hit the circle or the X button on the beat, if that makes sense. So if it says left, you can push left whenever you want, and just as long as you hit that circle button on the beat. Each song is going to be in a 4/4 measure, so it shouldn't have anything to worry about. The more you do them good, the more you do them in sequence, the better your combos are getting, and the better points you're going to get, the better you're going to do overall in this game. Each song will also have a couple of times where you take a solo in this game, so like it says just you, then just them, then just you, then just them, so that's kind of fun. Breaks it down a little bit. The different characters have different dance styles, but everyone plays pretty much the same. You just have to hit those buttons in the right sequence. Now, there are also distraction moves as well as evading the distraction moves as well. You have a full measure, so when you activate it, you have, well, 4 beats to the measure before you either have to evade it or, you know, or you'll take the damage. You know, you'll get hit. You can do that twice per level. The songs are addicting. The songs are fantastic. It was just a fun idea for a game, and I absolutely love this game. It's called Bust a Groove here in the US. If you're playing the import version like I am, Bust a Move, whatever works. Next up for Game Boy Color is WWF Betrayal. This is a WWF game, now known as WWE. It features The Rock, Steve Austin, Triple H, and The Undertaker. However, this game is not a wrestling game. I know that might be confusing because it's called WWF, and it has all these wrestlers from the time. But no, this is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, believe it or not. Yeah, it features other characters, you know, like here's Vince McMahon, you know, waving arms and stuff like that. Kind of reminds me of the used boat salesman from Monkey Island there. But no, other than that, it's just a single-player, side-scrolling beat 'em up. It's all it really is. And depending on who you play as, you can also, like, after a little bit, you can kind of do, you know, like your finishing move or something. You know, I'm playing a Steve Austin here, so you got the Stone Cold Stunner every once in a while. Moveset, very limited. This game, very monotonous. However, I was a huge wrestling fan, and it was kind of nice to see them using the wrestling IP to do a non-wrestling game. And I would love to see a modern-day side-scrolling beat-em-up. I would absolutely love it. I wish they would. I really wish they would. I think it would do really well. I know there was talk of one a while back, but I don't think it went anywhere. WWF Betrayal, this one is for the Game Boy Color. Look out for it. Moving on to the TurboGrafx-16, known for its wonderful side-scrolling shooters, and this one of the best, it's called Dead Moon. Dead Moon. I know there are so many shooters out there are so many games on the TurboGrafx-16, but when you hear about shooters for the TurboGrafx-16, you usually go straight to R-Type. Blazing Laser is a great one as well, but Dead Moon, man, it's one of my favorites. I absolutely love Dead Moon. I couldn't exactly tell you why, because it plays like well, let's be honest, just about every other side-scrolling shooter out there. But when they drop the items, you can pick those up, and those kind of become your new weapons. So if you're looking for a laser, looking for the wave weapons, looking for whatever kind of bullet things too. You can also pick up missiles. You can pick up little side buddies to help you shoot and protect and whatever it is too. I think I like this game because I love side-scrolling shooters. I'm not the biggest fan of bullet hell. I do like bullet hells, but I'm not the biggest fan of them. I would rather have I hate to say casual side-scrolling shooter experience. Just give me the wave of enemies and another wave of enemies and pick up some power-ups, defeat the boss, enjoy the background scenery. I mean, because bullet hells, I'm just like, it's like a precision platform. It's like, I want to be able to enjoy the game too. And Dead Moon, it's a game I absolutely enjoy. TurboGrafx 16, check it out. Hey, how about one for the Atari 2600? Taz, based on the Tasmanian Devil, 1983. This game came out during the crash of video games right here in the United States, but I loved this game. I was very sentimental for this game. I have a fond memory of at home and my dad, for no reason, just he was probably at the store and it was probably in the bargain bin or something like that, and he brought home a new Atari game. A new Atari game in 1983? Crazy. And I remember telling my sister, I was like, oh, hey, look what Dad just brought home, but don't tell anyone. And of course, if you tell a child, don't tell anyone, well, they immediately turned around and told my two older brothers too. So then, but still, I was trying to get some solo game time without being interrupted. The game itself, as you've already kind of told, you're just in this area for the 2600. You play as Taz in whirlwind mode. Eat the food, don't eat the dynamite. And the more you go, the more the food changes. Now, after a while, the cheeseburgers become root beer, yay! But you still have to avoid the dynamite, of course. Three strikes, you're out. Your typical style here. It's a high score getter. I don't think there is an end to this game. I've certainly never beaten it. I always just like to see how far I can get and then see what the food option turns into. I don't know. I still come back, like whenever I'm in an Atari 2600 mood, I come back to this game. Probably because, I have a direct nostalgia memory playing this when I was younger, when it first came out in 1983. Can you believe it? Taito always makes great games, and Growl, man, it's a wonderful one. Better than the arcade. This is for the Sega Genesis, by the way. This one is for the Sega Genesis. Great game. The controls are a little stiff. The controls are a little, and the side-scrolling beat-em-up action is a little, you know what I mean? I mean, it's not Streets of Rage, but not every game can be Streets of Rage. You have to mix it up a little bit too. Game with a good moral, game with a good value. You're defeating the poachers in this game, who are terrorizing and capturing the animals for their own profit or whatever. So you have to defeat them, and there are tons of those. If you like those side-scrolling beat-em-ups, you're like, oh cool, a lead pipe, or oh cool, a box to throw, or something like that. There's tons of those in this game, but there's like swords and guns, and as you saw, like the rocket launchers and stuff right at the beginning of the game, the whips and all that too. Very, very cool game. I mean, I'm a huge fan of this game for sure. Weirdest final boss ever. One of the weirdest final. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to show you in this video. I'm not going to tell you. You could look it up if you'd like. But the final boss in this game is a twist ending that you probably wouldn't see coming. But Growl for the Genesis or Mega Drive. Might want to check it out. It's pretty cool. And with that, let's check out Scott from Game Closet.
I've got a first-person shooter for you for the Xbox 360
and the PS3
called Singularity by Ravensoft and Activision of all people. Now, if you've played this before and you're saying, yes, I love this game, and I love John Riggs' videos, so hit that like button and the subscribe button if you haven't. Singularity got decent reviews, but sold fairly poorly, and that's why many people have never heard of this incredible game. You play as Captain Renko, a U.S. Marine sent to a former Soviet island that had been experimenting with the TMD, time manipulation device, that's powered by a mysterious substance known as E99. Because of an E99 bomb explosion in 1955, all heck breaks loose. Now, Captain Renko uses the TMD device and his weaponry to fight off mutated creatures and the forces of evil that are attempting to... Spoilers! Hey, it's an interesting story with a touch of horror and gore, and I wouldn't want to give away the best parts. We'll see you very soon. Back to you, John.
Thank you, kind sir. Amazing Penguin popped up on the list here. Amazing Penguin popped up. That was a game I recommended someone from Cameo, which, by the way, it's a service that I do on Cameo. A lot of times Cameo is more of the, like, hey, give you a shout out, give you a birthday, whatever. I like to use Cameo for hit me up with the kind of games you're looking for, and I will give you a personalized recommendation. And this was one of my personalized recommendations just recently. So I figured I'd add it to the video too. Amazing Penguin for the Game Boy Classic. A fun puzzle game on this one. You play as a penguin, as you can imagine. And a little bit like Kicks, kind of, where once the border of an area is cleared, it will fill in. And you have these little pegs or whatever these are. You can crush those just by walking over them while you hold down the button. And you have these other things too that you can crush, or you can kick them out of the way. You can kick them out of the way, which will also kick them into enemies and defeat them by squishing them or smushing them or whatever. Fill in the entire level, move on to the next stage. Nice and easy, but the game is not easy because, again, it's a puzzle type game. So the more you play it, the harder it gets, the more the enemies get a little bit more unpredictable, if you will. But it was just a simple style pick up and play. Perfect for the Game Boy, but still fun even on a Super Game Boy or Raspberry Pi or Mister or emulator, whatever. I'm not going to judge you how you play your games. You can hack a NES Classic for all I care, and we probably should. A little bit ago we talked about WWF Betrayal. Well, it was not a wrestling game, but this one is a wrestling game. Hammerlock Wrestling. We're on Super Nintendo now. Hammerlock Wrestling in Japan was Genichiro Tenryu, which is a wrestling name that may just fly over your head, doesn't really matter. He ran a wrestling promotion called Wrestle and Romance, WAR, War. This is that game, but in the United States. So they changed a couple of the characters. In fact, here you go right here. This is Genichiro Tenryu. The other guys are, you know, kind of the bootleg characters of maybe some other Japanese wrestlers. I thought it was interesting because you have the wrestling in the middle of the screen, and then it goes to like a cinematic mode on both sides depending on what the moves are. So you keep on wanting to see the other windows to watch the animations happen. but really you're supposed to watch the middle part to actually pull off your moves and maneuvers, and I just thought it was a cool idea for a wrestling game. There are better wrestling games on the Super Nintendo, but the uniqueness of this game made me want to showcase it even just for a moment. It's a game that, you already have the WWF games for the time for Super Nintendo. Maybe you even have WCW, which is another terrible wrestling game. But there's some great wrestling games on the Super Nintendo. This one's okay. This one might be worth checking out, especially for the cinematics. I just think it's pretty cool. Moving on to Game Boy Advance now, and now we have Denki Blocks. Denki Blocks is one of the best puzzle games you may have never heard of. Denki Blocks. Well, it's a fun, I mean, look at the graphics, first of all. This is like, it gives you that warm welcome, kiddish, cartoonish Game Boy Advance puzzle game realness. And then when you play the game, you have to make the blocks all stick together from the same color by any means necessary. Well, easy enough by any means necessary, really, right? So you just have these blocks that are in place, and by pushing like left, right, down, up, or whatever, you move all of them all at the same time. But by sticking them together, that's when you succeed. Congratulations. And as the levels move on, there's more obstacles in the way, and then sometimes like you might get too many of them stuck, so you have to like find a way around them and maneuver them and everything. Sometimes you have to make blocks of multiple colors, so you have to clear all of them out before you can move on to the next stage. And sometimes you'll even see there's like a bonus thing on the side there. It's like, oh, if you can do this and get the bonus points, you don't have to do it though, but it gives you an extra challenge. So either pass the stages and maybe you can always go back through and then try it again by getting the bonus blockade done, or just go through the game however you want to play this game. I just thought it was a unique and pretty fun idea for a game, but again, with the obstacles in the way and the more you play it your own way. Denki Blocks for the Game Boy Advance, a simple style puzzle game. I think it's really fun. Well, they say NES is NE best. That somebody is this guy, and that Andy Social Network guy on Twitch. But this is the game North and South. Have you played North and South yet? I think it's a super fun game. Better as a 2-player. It's okay as a 1-player. It's okay versus the computer. It's okay. It's fine. Much better as a 2-player game. But definitely check this game out, North and South. You can play as the North, you can play as the South and rewrite history if you'd like. But the idea is, and it looks like one of those weird strategy games, it kind of is, but this one doesn't play as hardcore as those other Koei style games that are just confusing to me in the first place. But you do this, you take out the opposition, and there's a few ways to do this, and I'll show you one of the prime ways that you'll see right here. Is you have your three, you have your guards, I don't know what the names of these people are. You have your people, your horses, and your cannon. I don't know if that's like your military infantry horse, I don't know, but you can swap them back. You can switch them around and everything. The horses will just keep going and slash their sword. The other ones have guns, and of course your cannon can power up your shot and hopefully destroy. And you can also use that cannon to destroy bridges and stuff like that too. Makes it nice and easy for you. But once you clear them out, or they clear you out, then you can kind of capture the flag, if you will. And to just keep playing from there. There's so much more going on in this game too. There's actually parts where like you invade the forts and all that to like, really capture the flag. North and South, it's a super, super fun game. Again, way better as a 2-player game but as a one-player game, I think it plays pretty well. And I only do 10 consoles per video, so other videos also might have Dreamcast or GameCube or Nintendo 64, but those are 10 for this video. We'll do another one coming up soon. Thank you for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. Check out those other videos in the meantime, too. We'll get some more videos out as soon as we can for you.